Happy New Year, everyone. I'd like to call to order the City Council meeting of January 7th, 2025. Before asking the city clerk to call the roll for tonight's regular meeting, is there a motion to excuse Councilmember Pascal?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Falcone, second by Councilmember Sweet to excuse Councilmember Pascal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. May I also have a motion to excuse Councilmember Black? He's unable to attend the beginning of tonight's meeting when he returns from King County Council meeting. Is there a motion to excuse Councilmember Black?
So moved. Second.
Motion's been moved by Councilmember Sweet, second by Councilmember Falcone. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Tim Chizen.
Here.
Councilmember Sweet.
Here.
Councilmember Falcone.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Arnold.
Here.
And Mayor Curtis.
Here. Our study session tonight is 2 items. First, we'll have an update on the Houghton Village development. Second, we will have a briefing on the Washington State middle housing compliance. I want to say missing middle. We're calling it middle housing. We expect to reconvene our regular meeting at 7:30. City Manager.
So thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. So just a reminder, this was a presentation that was supposed to happen on November 19th. You had a lot on that calendar, the comprehensive plan as well as the budget. So that presentation was postponed until today. Today, this is our opportunity to get feedback. So we're not looking for any final decisions on the development plan. This is your chance to provide us with input. So I'll first turn this over to our Deputy City Manager of External Affairs, Jim Lopez. He's also going to be joined following that by our Deputy Planning and Building Director, Allison Zeich, who's also running the show, our DEIB Manager, Erica Pascaro.
2025, folks.
As well as our Bethune consultants, Heidi Oyen, and Eco Northwest consultants, Leanne Ryan and Tyler Bump, who are all virtual, who will join in the presentation. So with that, I would like to turn over to Mr. Lopez.
I'm wondering if that's my effect on the lights, City Manager.
It was early.
Second time.
That is.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. It's really my privilege to be before you tonight, talking about the Houghton Village Development Plan, along with the staffers and architects and economists who have been working so hard on this project. We're deeply grateful for their time. So I'm going to jump in and basically give a quick overview and then turn it over to Heidi from Bethune to take the balance of the narrative. Council, I'd like to start just by talking a little bit about the community feedback on this project. I'm going to, in the next slide, go back all the way to January of 2022 and talk a little bit about how it started. But I'd like to start with a micro look at the feedback, because tonight we're talking about option B, and this is the kind of design that's driving the latest thinking on the development plan. And we've got some specific, jumping right into it, some specific feedback on option B. We're going to talk about that. So some of the common themes that were widely supported was that it provides more opportunity for larger and smaller commercial and community spaces that can open to and flow to the public open space. There was a lot of talk about placemaking, and I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about that in the broader outreach as well. There was a lot of feedback, positive feedback around the central public spaces providing flexibility for a variety of community uses, and that providing a feeling of safety because it's separated from vehicle traffic. And safety is a common theme we're going to hear from, we've heard from the community throughout this process. And there were many comments, bless you, that expressed the desire for a strong integration of art into the site. Again, consistent with that theme of a really enjoyable, desirable place to go. Some potential concerns on option B, and we'll talk about more through the evening. You need to find ways for the two buildings in option B to feel more cohesive, so that it is one space, especially if residential uses are divided into affordable and market rate housing. So there's this integration issue of how does the whole area work together interdependently. There's a balance of community spaces and privacy for residents. That's a big thing. The community wanted to see a nice balance for those things. And again, another common theme of traffic on 68th is heavy, so the redevelopment needs to make things safer for active transportation. We did put a little box on this slide because there is a ongoing, with certain members of the community, ongoing concern about 5 stories. And in our focus group meetings, even though that wasn't a topic that we were taking feedback on, we did get that feedback for folks, and we really appreciate everybody's commitment to the process, and people have really been committed, and it's been really great. The fact that that wasn't on the agenda, we wanted to let you know that folks raised it anyway. So let me jump back a minute. Now that you've had that kind of immediate feedback on option B, it seems like, I don't know, time just seems to be moving faster these days for me. I don't know. We're talking January 18th, 2022 was when this resolution was passed, nearly 3 years ago. And 5522 was right around the time, which I think is important to note, that the PCC, there we go again. The PCC, it actually adds to the atmosphere. The PCC had left the building. They had exited stage right. So at the time the city became involved in this, the property was on the precipice of being put up to the general public for sale. And I think the idea of these affordable, so the council passed Resolution 5522 authorizing the purchase of the property. And in that resolution, you see the stated goals in support of affordable housing, community and art, nonprofit organizations, public school, and other public purposes in Kirkland. It's not likely that would have been part of the private sector agenda. Could have been, not likely. And I think it's good to have the context by which, when the project started, the context by which the city got involved, it was coming to market, and the action we took in order to preserve and put forth these goals. So in that 5522 foundation, before I turn it over to Heidi, I do want to talk a little bit about the broader outreach, because over the course of the nearly 3 years that follow the passage of 5512, we have done a lot of outreach. And again, big thank you to all the folks who have been part of that outreach, from focus groups to community meetings and town halls. I would like to extrapolate 4 themes. And I'd like to talk a little bit about those 4 themes to provide us a little bit of overview as to how we've been listening and how they've been kind of interpreted in option B in the work that we're doing. Those 4 things that I've pulled out are heights, building heights, neighborhood center heights as a constant issue to be responded to. The need to create a sense of place. We talked about that in the immediate, but that has been constant throughout. Safety of the project. I remember at one of the community meetings that we spent a good deal of time talking about pedestrian safety and kids getting to school in a safe way. And related to safety, but has its own issues, and that is traffic. So let me just talk about these 4 things really quickly. And Heidi Oin from Methuen will be talking about these throughout her presentation. So really quickly, the neighborhoods, what I asked to do is kind of aggregate all the other neighborhood centers in the city, just to provide a little context about where the Houghton Everest development might fit in. There are other economic zones for sure, but these, I think, are good comparisons to the area that we're talking about. Currently, Houghton Everett is zoned to about 35 feet. That's essentially 3 stories. But you could see Juanita, Finn Hill, Kingsgate, North Rose Hill, and South Rose Hill are all at 5 stories or more than 50 feet. And Juanita going up to 78 feet. And I think that's the part of the reason why I think this slide is important, is because contextually, the option B idea is consistent with where growth is currently, where we have growth currently in the city. It's not outcome determinative for sure, but it's good context to see growth where growth is planned to go. So that now the other proposition about height, which Heidi will talk about, is height is an integral part of maximizing the public dollar, getting the most of the goals that you can accomplish by having more space to put things, housing, social enterprise, retail stores, restaurants, and the like. So with respect to the height, we are certainly listening, but these are the reasons why I think option B continues to have And the whole point of the development plan is if you are going to put a 5-story development in there, you have to do a development plan. So that answers, I think, to a certain extent, why option B has 5 stories. Now, the second thing was a sense of place, and this is a really big deal. Somewhere the community can gather, connect, and access goods and services. In my vernacular, and forgive me, it's been about restaurants and ice cream. You know, I just love that stuff, and there's a very, very successful sense of place at the Village of Totem Lake, and we looked at that as well. So there's this whole idea of a place where people in the community would like to go and gather, woven through and central to the site. And I think what we've tried to do in option B is create that sense of place where you could see retail flowing through that middle, I don't know, it's like Park Lane size road that goes into a common area with somewhat bucolic with trees, and then takes you potentially to the CKC. Again, focusing on the Kirkland corridor and Lakeview Elementary as a kind of passage the children could use that area. But more than anything, or at least equal to that, would be a place where people really want to go. Now, in addition to the sense of place, I put this slide in, you know, again, being responsive to our really important community input. You can see the kind of smaller level diversity among retail. There's plenty of room for retail and restaurants, several of them. Again, this is for illustrative purposes only. The council has all the ability in the world to be flexible here, and the development plan can be as specific or kind of as flexible as you'd like. But seeing that the design is very receptive to things like community space and office space and restaurants and the like. So we're trying to be responsive to that aesthetic and that very intentional decision to create a place where people want to go. Now, of course, the next one is safety, and safety has always been a top priority, and we received a lot of input on that, and safety is an ongoing conversation. Some of the things that Heidi's going to talk about is reducing the number of existing curb cuts where there's potential for vehicle and pedestrian conflicts. We view this as a really big deal. And we are modeling, the transportation folks are helping us model the best way to reduce curb cuts in this design. Also, ideas like widening the sidewalk on 68th Street and extending a dedicated bike lane on the road, which will buffer people from the sidewalk from vehicles. 68th Street, as everybody knows, is very popular, and using those kind of micro strategies to enhance safety is a big part of option B. And again, providing an alternative path to and from Lakeview Elementary. This is a big deal. I got on one of the community meetings, again, we spent a good deal of time, moms and dads in the community, talking about kids getting to school. This option B does provide that path through the development into the CKC area that would be, you know, looks like a pleasant way to get to school. So these are just some of the reasons how we're listening and adapting and trying to be creative to rise to the level of the community's interest, and just generally good design principles around safety. And finally, of course, there's traffic. How could there not be traffic? And this is an area that does suffer from traffic. The development plan builds on the recommendations, of course, of the 6th Street South Corridor study. This is going to be and continues to be a really big part of our thinking, and the design from A to Z will always include some inquiry into how traffic is going to be mitigated. Now, interestingly and importantly, based on the previous grocery and retail uses and the anticipated residential and commercial uses in the development plan, the redevelopment of the property actually may result in fewer daily trips during peak hours. And we're modeling this and we're staying close with it. Now, again, there's qualifiers here. We can't predict the future, and the qualifier is peak hours. But moving from the PCC retail grocery to mixed use and a lot of diversity in what businesses and housing units are there actually has the real potential of reducing daily trips during peak hours. Again, that is yet to be seen. The city's 20-year transportation plan does prioritize active transportation improvements. And kind of the short answer there is whenever we redevelop, we're always looking to improve. So this would be an opportunity for us to do that, and we welcome the opportunity to do it. And the draft development plan does provide for future new street connections that will avoid the Northeast 68th Street and 6th Street South intersection. So Heidi will provide more information on that. So that's just a kind of overview. I wanted to do that at the beginning of the presentation to make sure that the context of the entire presentation was framed in a way that is being responsive to community input. And we are eager and welcome additional input as we move forward and after we get council's input tonight. So thank you, City Manager. I think at this point, Madam Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to Heidi, who is somewhere here in the ether.
Right here.
Yes. Hi, Heidi.
Can you hear me? Hi, everybody. Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
Hello, council members, mayor and council members. Thanks for having me back tonight. I am super excited to present the draft plan. I'll focus on the physical components, and then Echo Northwest will walk through some financial aspects. So this is an overall view of the development plan from the southwest. In the thick dashed red line, you can see the proposed new street that's required by the transportation connections map. So this is now an extension of 106th Avenue, which takes 3 turns as it reaches 6th Street. And it was selected by staff based on Transpo Group's separate traffic analysis with the goal to improve safety, enhance pedestrian experience, while also making meaningful parcels for redevelopment. We really like that the new alignment keeps the Houghton Village parcel as one big site that, as we'd shown in our favorite option, option B, but it's a little more rectangular now. You can see we're also showing the new bike lane on 68th, which should improve cycling traffic along 68th. And in the dashed green, you can see our proposed connection to the CKC from the new Pocket Park on the north side of that new street. I'll go into more detail on that configuration and the safety improvements when we get to a site plan. So great opportunities exist to create new housing units here. You can see the data on the right hand of the slide. And as you know, during phase 2, Echo Northwest did feasibility studies of the initial options, studying market rate rental, affordable rental, and co-op affordable ownership housing. And so in the draft plan, we're illustrating that affordable co-op ownership housing for both buildings, which would be affordable to families earning 100% AMI. And then combined, the buildings contain 145 residential units, and then they could share resident amenities among the 2 buildings. The bottom of the slide shows a sectional view through the project with the 2 buildings having 4 stories of residential, that's shown in yellow. Then the ground floor or community spaces, total about 26,000 square feet, are shown in pink. And then we've consolidated to 1 below grade, 1 level kind of sloped parking garage with 230 stalls. And that would be shared by both residential buildings and the commercial ground floor spaces. You should note the code requires 355 stalls now, but using the station area plan ratios for 85th would only require 180 stalls. So we're about 50 over that. Next slide, please. There we go. Looks like lightning speed there. Okay, so this is a site plan showing the initial or first phase when only Houghton Village is developed before its neighbors. You can see the new street extension of 106th at 68th, which should provide access to the Houghton Village parking. The garage entry is off that street extension, so no direct entry from 68th. As Jim mentioned earlier, we know there's a lot of community concern about the safety of this intersection along 68th in general, especially as a safe route to school. So Public Works has been designing the intersection and aiming to improve safety by reducing that site access to the single access point rather than the 2 driveways that exist today, adding a traffic signal in phase 1, marking crosswalks, and improving lighting in the area. We've heard that it's just kind of dark with some of the trees around there and that safety could just be improved with lighting. In this interim condition before for adjacent sites are redeveloped, this street would perform as a temporary fire lane for Houghton Village only. We're showing sidewalks on one side, kind of on that inner side, and then it loops around the site to connect to 68th again. And of course, the big move on the site is creating the public courtyard that meanders from 68th on the east through the central courtyard and then to a smaller, what we're calling North Plaza, with that connection to the CKC. Let's go to the next slide, if you would. Phase 2, or future build-out condition. This is when all adjacent neighbors have redeveloped. Obviously, we don't know what'll be on the adjacent sites, so we're showing something very conceptual on each adjacent site. At this point in development, the permanent new street would be complete with added parallel parking on both sides and sidewalks with street trees, and then you see that full extension to the north. The street would maintain that single access point from 68, so it would serve both Houghton Village and Lakeview Center garages and would replace the existing Lakeview Center driveway and thereby contributing to the safety improvements and pedestrian experience along 68th. Houghton Plaza access would be from 6th Street in a single access point as well. So the temporary fire lane would no longer be needed for fire access at Houghton Village once that permanent street is added. So we're showing just the east portion of the site as a landscaped side yard. Okay, let's zoom into the next slide. This just zooms in a little bit on the plan I've just been talking about. The central courtyard is envisioned as a public space with multiple medium-sized areas where the community can gather without having to buy anything. We know this is really desirable to the community alongside just vibrant commercial restaurant and retail options. The courtyard can be designed to have that really unique sense of place that sets the tone for the entire development. In our conceptual design, we're taking advantage of the grade change across the site to create a small amphitheater that can be used for community theater or cultural celebrations, but then could also be used as seating or play area when unprogrammed. There are intimate, higher level seating spaces that overlook the courtyard and would offer great people watching opportunities. If people like anything, they like watching other people. And then the grade change in the courtyard would be accomplished with stairs and ramps that are accessible to disabled persons or those pushing strollers. So on that northeast corner of the site, we've set back from the street to make North Plaza. That could have outdoor seating for the public, maybe a fire pit or a fountain. And then we're showing an artistic raised crosswalk leading across that new street to the trail connection to the CKC. And this can be a safer route to school, separated from traffic on 68th. The city would need to negotiate an easement with adjacent property owners to achieve this. And I think they can speak to this, but I think they're interested in even doing this in a first phase. As far as ground floor uses, lots of opportunities exist to create the spaces preferred by the public during the engagement process. And while the actual uses aren't nailed down and they could vary over time, we're showing 7 ground floor spaces, assigning 4 or 5 for retail restaurant uses and 2 or 3 for community uses. So going counterclockwise and starting in that north part of Building 1 next to the North Plaza, this is the place for pizza and ice cream. The community said multiple times they want these kind of establishments, and we think putting family destinations on the North Plaza with plenty of outdoor seating is the best place for that kind of thing, kind of like Salt and Straw destination at Totem Village. Then our approach for the ground floor along 68th, moving from left to right, is really to activate the street with retail and restaurant spaces in both buildings. In Building 1, we're showing a corner retail space at 106th, as well as a large space for food vendors with access to outdoor seating kind of at the east side of Building 1. This could host small startup micro businesses that share a commercial kitchen. We're envisioning something like Tuckwilla's Spice Bridge, which is a really great place if you have never been. Building 2, we're showing 2 smaller spaces that could fit cafes or small shops. And then access from the courtyard in Building 2, we're showing a community conference center with meeting spaces similar to the Together Center in Redmond. And then lastly, on the north part of Building 2, we've located after-school programs for kids where they could be close to that CKC connection to Lakeview Elementary. So we think this overall mix of uses hits a lot of the desires from the diverse community and can make a really vibrant ground floor experience at Houghton Village. Let's go to the roof plan now. Houghton Village has great potential to become an environmental sustainability showcase and demonstrate best practices in stormwater management, tree canopy, biodiversity, low carbon efficient and low energy building systems. We developed a sustainability guidelines for the development plan based on what you adopted for the 85th stationary plan. It's a little bit different, and these are in your packet. The roof plan here, you can see opportunities for resident roof terraces with potential views to the lake, as well as green roofs and photovoltaic arrays. I just want to note too that this site is also subject to citywide and zone-specific design guidelines. We're not going to go through these now, but they're in your packet. And these are meant to set some of the standards for the project moving forward. And then let's go to the last slide. These are a few 3D views of Houghton Village at different angles, and look for the dashed red line that shows or indicates where 68th is. So each building, we're showing roughly 4 residential floors atop that commercial community space. The residential floors step back 15 feet from the ground floors along the street per your zoning code. And because the site is so sloped, and we want the ground floors to have generous public-worthy ceiling heights, you can see that along the highest or east portion of 68th, we've made taller ceiling space on the ground floor by removing the second floor of residential above. So this leaves only 3 residential levels for some portions of the building. We think this provides some variety to the facades and keeps the project from looking too large and monotonous along 68. And we know there's community concern over building height. Jim was talking about about community concern about height. We're showing this many levels of residential because from a purely physical perspective, we're trying to allocate enough space for housing units to meet your affordable housing goals on the site. We can talk more about that if you have questions. I know Echo Northwest can address the feasibility of going or taking units or taking levels off. Overall, the final building massing could look a bit different than what we're showing here. This is our chosen path to meet the design regulations in KZC Chapter 92. Unarticulated boxes wouldn't comply. But the future architect of the project could and should interpret the code as needed for a particular developer designing for a specific resident group. The design guidelines section of our draft plan is meant to highlight the critical components to take forward. And then a final note for the final plan will render from the ground level more realistic views that show what it would feel like to be in the courtyard and along the street. So that's the last design slide. I'll hand it over to Echo Northwest to go over economic feasibility. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Heidi. Thank you, members of the council. My name is Tyler Bump from Echo Northwest. I'm going to talk into some of our high-level sort of summary recommendations here with you all today. Before I do, one thing I want to note is that Heidi just went through those physical diagrams of how they were thinking from a design and architecture perspective around how to think through the site. And we were looking at that from a different sort of development feasibility perspective. So we were looking at market rate feasibility with your current inclusionary program. We were looking through more of a mixed income project that had a higher threshold of affordability as part of the overall development program. And then we also looked at this cooperative ownership model, which is starting to emerge as a best practice that a lot of communities are asking us to look at in terms of thinking about opportunities for ownership types or kind of ownership, similar kinds of housing that's a little bit more attainable and accessible from a price point, but it is still relatively sort of cutting edge for the scale of development that we're looking at here. So on the key takeaways here for the feasibility analysis, a lot of these are directly related to some of the site design and development recommendations we're going to have on the next slide. But one of the things to highlight is that the scale of required parking greatly affects development feasibility, whether it's a market rate development or affordable development or a cooperative ownership. Oftentimes we do these development feasibility analyses, and it really is parking that drives how we think about feasibility because it really impacts the efficiency of the yield on the residential and commercial components of that development project. So the parking is really, really important. Affordable housing is feasible and shows to be really feasible in the analysis that we've done. And we had some conversations with affordable housing developers as part of our engagement here. But the timing of tax credits does create a little bit of uncertainty. So making sure that there's flexibility as the city of Kirkland and the community moves forward with this process to support any tax credits of affordable housing. tax credit component as part of the future development. Cooperative models can create feasible ownership opportunities at a premium relative to market rate rents, just a little bit higher than market rate rents, but also opportunities for ownership, share ownership in that cooperative way that is more attainable than other ownership options across Kirkland as well. On the policy recommendation side, these are really development strategy, disposition strategy recommendations. Think about securing additional time with clear decision-making milestones to maximize desired outcomes. What are the priorities of the site? What's the vision of the site? Making sure that you can articulate those from a community perspective and the city's perspective so that when you go through disposition strategy, it's really clear of what you're asking for. Leveraging the city's ownership of the site to maximize public benefit is, again, best practice. Cities and other public agencies acquiring sites specifically to support public benefits that otherwise might not be achieved by the private sector is the thing that is, again, best practice here. Establishing clear priorities on land ownership, housing affordability goals, public benefits, and viable commercial options is also one of the things that you want to think about as you move forward in this disposition strategy process. Next slide, please. So on the site and programming recommendations, again, parking for us usually, reducing parking requirements is really important to the feasibility of the site and to get some of those other public benefits and the site design outcomes that Heidi went over as well to make sure that this works from a scale and a design and a feasibility standpoint. Creating opportunities for flexible commercial space. We've tested in our analysis discounted rents for community uses, for discounted commercial uses to make sure that there's that public benefit opportunity in both commercial space and community space for entrepreneurship. But that needs to be flexible in how you think about tenanting and opportunities for those commercial spaces. Consider additional height to maximize residential capacity. It really is when you get to that fifth story from a development construction type standpoint that you start to see some efficiency in that additional floor that has a lot of value that supports the feasibility of that development project. Continue to explore options for affordable homeownership through alternative models. We had some conversations with folks throughout this process with developers, affordable housing developers, lenders around this co-op model. Again, it's relatively new, but it is really intriguing from a feasibility standpoint and an outcome standpoint. And then on the development strategy recommendations, again, this gets to that disposition strategy. Really be clear about the developer selection criteria. What are you looking for? What's that vision? What are the priorities? Build that into the scoring and evaluation criteria as you think about disposition. Initiate engagement with development partners to start to explore agreements and start to think about issuing an RFP. At some point, you have to figure out what is the path forward to disposing of the site, what is the vision that you want to do, start to have some conversations with partners to figure out what that looks like in the current environment and what development might look like a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road as you go through that disposition strategy. Engage potential funding partners. There's other funding partners out there to think about on affordable homeownership, on affordable rental, on commercial opportunities. Think about the opportunities to engage with regional partners. And then one of the things that we heard from our development interviews is consider prioritizing a single developer for the site to get commitments to the full development and build out of the site, but also to work through the flexibility of doing different phases of development or single phase of development, depending on what works best in the context of the market at that point in time. But think about a single developer for the site. Oftentimes there's development partnerships between market rate developers, affordable developers, other affordable housing organizations as part of that too. But a single sort of development partner is part of that site. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it back to Heidi.
And I think Allison wanted to go over these questions. Allison, is that right? Or would you like me to lead that?
Or me. I could take it too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Tyler. And Ally, jump right in anytime. So council, this is where we take a pause and ask for questions. And we have the full team here to be responsive.
And
Madam Mayor?
these are the questions that you would like us to address.
For consideration, but we'll take any questions that you have.
Council, comments, questions, curiosity? Deputy Mayor?
Sure, I'll kick us off. First, in the category of additional information, the development plan draft is pretty specific about saying, here's the amount of restaurant and retail space versus community and nonprofit space. And wondering, and I get that the analysis at this point is saying, here's a feasible option that works. One of the things that I'm interested in is how does changing some of those mixes impact feasibility? When I look at what's there. The Together Center was mentioned, and I would want to prioritize more nonprofit office space in addition to the shared kind of community space that's listed. I don't see enough of that there and want to know how much of the financial assumptions are tied to some of the retail and restaurant uses. Second, and this kind of goes between the first and the second bullet, is how much of the development plan is a vision versus a policy document? I'm super unclear on this, both in saying, is this what we're assuming we're building, or is this an example? And would like some more detail on that. To the second bullet, I don't think we need additional details. I think this shows kind of the direction we're going. I'm concerned about getting too specific without actually engaging a developer. We've got some feedback here that says, here's something that's feasible, but I'd like to really engage with a partner because they may have additional feedback. And on the third bullet, I like the fact that we're looking at this phased for the property that the city controls, but also a vision for the future as adjacent properties redevelop, and would definitely want to provide a way for those property owners to either consolidate or develop in future phases. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sweet?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sort of just launching off the Deputy Mayor's comments, I think where I'm struggling with this at this point is sort of the assignment of kind of what kind of things are going to go in what kind of places. We did that with Juanita Village. We isolated space in Juanita Village that was going to house a grocery store. And it took us a long time to walk away from that. So it worries me, given both the retail environment and restaurant environment that's out here right now, for us to overcommit. I agree with the Deputy Mayor that if we find the right partners and if we find, partners in the social human services fields, then for sure we're going to want to accommodate more space for nonprofits. But, we're kind of a nonprofit too. So it's hard for me to imagine being able to move forward with this unless we have a little bit more sureness in terms of what we're committing ourselves to. It's why I'm a little uneasy about where we are in this process. I don't think we've moved a whole lot from where we were, several months ago. I think we're still kicking around designs and we're kicking around thinking about the could-bes. I do believe that we have listened to the community. We've incorporated all of that. It's how we come up with a grand plan that I struggle with. And maybe an electrician. In terms of additional details, no, I don't think we're at a place where we can put additional details into this until we are more firm on where it is and we're going to go and with whom. And what's the other one? Oh, yes, definitely. I feel like that should or articulate an amendment process if we can incorporate the adjoining properties all the way through the pneumatic folks. But I'm just feeling really uncertain about what our vision is, or if we're even ready to nail that vision down yet.
So, Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
just first on the lights. So we have a faulty sensor, which we can't fix tonight. So we have awesome clerk people who are going to just
Yeah, I
keep
was
hitting
going
the
to say,
light.
we have Quinn at the back
Quinn,
here, ready to roll.
Emily, so I'm sorry about that, but that's what's happening, and we'll try to fix it as soon as we can. I'm hoping maybe just briefly Adam or Allison can speak to the issue of flexibility, because I think that those ground floor uses and other uses versus the sort of building envelope and other amenities that we're talking about, it'd be important to know like what can be changed and what sort of this level of detail is actually requiring. I think that'd be helpful for all of you, because I heard that in my calls from everybody. It's like, so like how much room to maneuver is there if we do this?
Right. So the development plan, we've illustrated likely uses, what we think could be good fits there. And we did that for a few reasons. One is we wanted to test them. As Tyler mentioned, we wanted to model what would it look like? Is it still feasible if the city does choose to offer, say, reduced rents to some of those spaces? So we wanted to make sure that we included that in the economic analysis. So for practical purposes, we kind of had to pick some type of mix. But we also wanted to show you and the community that we listened, that we've heard you, and that a site with a design similar to this could accommodate a variety of uses that are responsive to the types of things that the community wants to see happen at Houghton Village. And so that being said, the ultimate development plan does not have to include prescribed uses and prescribed spaces. And so in terms of what we adopt in the development plan, we could include that as an illustration, but include a caveat. We could strike the actual labels. So there's a variety of ways that we could address it. We can stay pretty flexible and high level in the adopted development plan, but you could, through an RFP process, decide to assign scoring criteria that prioritizes certain uses. So there's ways that you can continue to drill down in specificity as you move through the process. And if you're interested, I think Heidi could maybe opine quickly on, in terms of the design, how flexible what Methuen has looked at is in terms of moving dividing walls and stuff like that on the ground floor.
Sure. So, thanks, Allison. When we typically do development plans, oftentimes we're kind of setting a range of what the uses could be and how much development could be done. So, and sometimes this is written into zoning codes for development plan requirements. So an example is a project I worked on in Portland under their plan development code. And they basically say you can't vary any of the areas, heights, or number of units by more than 10% up or down from the development plan. But they do let you put in the development plan a range of heights or areas that 10% applies to. So it gives you some wiggle room within a range you're comfortable with. And so for this project, it could make sense to set a 3-story number or area and height up to a 5-story number area and height, and the unit range and area range that goes with that. I think generally, again, Allison articulated the type of uses very well. I think you will have initial uses in the building. The commercial ground floor should be designed to be very flexible. You should expect a 100-year building here. We know that retail, commercial uses change a lot over time. So we're representing some of the potential uses and thinking about some of the sizes of the uses that may be consistent along any number of commercial type spaces. I hope that answered what you thought I was going to answer, Allison. Happy to take more questions too.
Thank you.
Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I agree with most of the feedback I've heard and really appreciate staff and consultants' responses to those questions because I had very similar questions. My initial response in reading this was, well, first, thank you for helping create, like I think is an improved visualization based on the input that we gave last time of, we want to go with option B. We want to see a little bit more of what that might look like and what the feasibility is with the economic analysis. So thank you for that. That is helpful. I do think this is a really good starting point as far as what our general kind of vision is, and agree with my colleagues that I really appreciate the responses that there is still that flexibility in there, not only for like the ground floor uses, but also with the housing as well, right? Like we know, like we heard about the what's in there now with the co-op ownership, but that there could be other potential mixes of affordable and market rate or something around there. I want to maintain that flexibility. I think that's going to be really important. Some of this feels a little bit chicken and egg with like having conversations with potential developers on what's going to actually work, which is why I so wholeheartedly agree with like the theme of flexibility here, that we want to have a general vision. I think you've done a good job of incorporating not only council input from our last meeting, but the vast community input that we received. I know I've been in several meetings and town halls and other things over the past couple of years with community members and really heard and had great conversations around both some of the concerns, but also some of the exciting visions that folks have around community gathering spaces, around, ice cream and pizza or whatever that may be, making sure that it's some really practical things too, making sure that we have covered spaces, that there's, whether it be a fireplace or a heating out or something that it can be used year round, right? That we have the safety improvements for school walk route safety for the schools that are nearby. That's extremely important, making sure, all of the details that are in here, I think it does a good job of incorporating all of that community input, and really what the community's vision is for this space moving forward. But again, want to have the flexibility so we can have those conversations and then come back to community and council and say, hey, this is, how that's going, and kind of hashing out some more of the details as we get further along. So I do appreciate that. I wouldn't want to be, as you mentioned, doesn't have to be overly prescriptive. I wouldn't want that to be, and then, narrow the pool of even developers that would even be interested in it, right? Like this one specific, very overly prescribed thing. So I think that's really important for us to have. So thank you for that. I think I mentioned the safety, the traffic. Yes, we hear you. I hear you. I understand. There's a saying that if you're sitting in traffic, you are traffic, right? And so I am traffic because both of my kids go to school very close proximity to here. And so I'm very familiar with that, with the traffic around here as well. And oftentimes I'm walking with my kids to amenities to and from their schools close by as well. So we are both pedestrian traffic and car traffic in this area on a daily basis. And so I'm very familiar with that and understand the needs there in that hyperlocal area. And yeah, just thank you everyone for your work on it, and keep being engaged, community members. There's a lot of neighbors not only in close proximity who've given their vision, but throughout the city who've really given some great ideas and vision for this space. And I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Tim Chisholm.
Thank you. So the original mission with this project was to provide workforce housing at an affordable cost. And we've got a lot of mission creep here. We're providing together centers now and all other sorts of discounted rent for everybody. The original mission was to provide housing, and I think we should focus on that mission. Councilmember Sweet brings up some good points about commercial space and deciding who gets what and who's going to be there. I think it's easier to leave it more flexible in the initial stages of a project like this rather than trying to decide who gets what and discounted rent. The housing is the driver here, and we're getting, I think, too far afield from that. Lake Washington School District sounds like a good partner. If there's an opportunity to partner with them, great. I would have liked to have seen a proposal of 3 stories from Methuen. That would have been helpful, as opposed to bringing us 3 versions that were only 5 stories. I may support 5 stories, but I haven't seen a version for 3 stories. And it's problematic to tell our residents that 3 stories is unfeasible when the hotel that was just constructed on the same corner is 3 stories. So I don't want to zone a monolith, and I do appreciate the fact that the 5-story version B does break up the structure a little bit, so it doesn't look like an enormous erection that is in the Houghton Village, and the buildings around it may not be of the same height. The adjoining properties, I don't know if there's any agreements with those property owners to do anything, but we're depicting 5-story buildings on their property, and I don't know that there's any agreement in place with those property owners to do that. I am encouraged by the option B. I think it does break up things well, but I think we should return to the it's been 4 years here of paying a $15 million debt service. And I think we should return to the main mission of providing housing and let the pieces fall where they may on the commercial space. And, we'll find tenants, but we're trying to find tenants now. And the housing hasn't been delivered, and I fear that we will never deliver the housing if we're too concerned with finding tenants for a building at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a couple thoughts. One, I think we all agree housing is one of the key goals, but I just want to be clear on the first resolution, we did articulate more than housing is something that the city council wanted to make possible with this, the other public benefits. Also, the 3 stories, you don't have to do a development plan to get to the 3 stories. The 3 stories is allowed under existing code today. I think one of the things that Heidi was saying, if the council's interested, we could certainly do more work on that. I mean, that's not, we weren't trying to preclude that, but you have to have a development plan to get to 5 stories. So I think we're trying to show what that might look like and how that might accomplish it. But even just going out to the market and saying, does anyone want to make a 3-story proposal, we could do. But if the council is interested in more exploration of 3 stories, we could do that. So I just want to make sure we weren't ignoring 3 stories. It's just that you don't have to do a development plan for 3 stories.
Well, the contractor brought us 3 options, and I just wasn't clear why one of those options wasn't 3 stories. And if they brought us an option that was 3 stories, and they said, hey, only X units would fit in here, and on the 5-story options, Y units would fit in here, then I think we would be able to articulate to people why we chose 5 stories better. It doesn't mean I'm not in favor of 5 stories, but just telling me it's unfeasible remains I think, I'd like to see an extra step. Thanks.
Well, Councilman Tim Chisholm, it's not that it's unfeasible, and I think our consultants can give you a broad range of what the property would look like at 3 stories, like what percentage less in housing you would have or what percentage less in commercial space that you would have. So it's not that it's unfeasible, it's just that those numbers would be less maximizing the dollar against the goals stated in the resolution. It's certainly possible for us to model 3 in more detail than that, but I don't know if you'd like that data. We've asked our consultants to give you a general overview of what 3 stories would look like in terms of housing and available square footage. We could do that.
I would appreciate it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to know. I mean, bringing us 3 stories that are 3 options that were all 5 stories, I just didn't get an opportunity to look at that.
Yeah, Heidi and Tyler, wondering if you could jump in and give us an answer on that one broadly.
Sure, thanks. Maybe I'll start with some of the physical aspects, and Tyler, you can take the financial stuff. From my experience as an architect, you need several upper wood levels relative to the expensive concrete levels, the foundations, the parking garage, the ground floor commercial spaces, and all those community spaces that you want to make a construction budget work. The additional upper levels of wood levels are much less expensive compared to all of those other elements. So removing a story on each building would delete about 38 units or 26% of all the units and drop the unit count to 107. Removing 2 stories to get to 3 total would result in only 69 units. At that point, I start thinking about, should this be a townhouse project if it's only 3 stories? Maybe there's a separate commercial building and townhouse project, but something really different. Tyler should speak to the numbers on that. But note that this is not zoned for ground floor housing. You cannot have it. You can have some amenity, we think. We're interpreting the requirements to say you can have amenity spaces and lobbies and things like that, but you cannot have housing here. It's meant to be a commercial center. So Tyler, why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, I think so. With only effectively 2 floors of residential above 1 floor of commercial, it is going to be really challenging from an efficiency and a revenue standpoint to generate the revenue on the residential square footage to be able to cover the commercial, cover site improvement costs, and cover the parking for sure. And so again, we're coming up with this trade-off of how you design for parking, how do you get it underground, how do you do the sort of structured parking component with it with fewer residential, and it makes it really inefficient and challenging to do from a feasibility standpoint. If there were 3-story limitation in place on development on the site, the market may very well prefer to build 3-story townhomes, of which we looked at a bunch of comps as part of our market study for this, and they're generally
I
about.
wanted to ask you for townhomes. All
Yeah,
right.
I mean, that's the sort of scale of the 3-story development that might work with 3-story. And then with the ground floor commercial requirement, it's really tough to make work. So I would say that it has to do with the parking and the feasibility and the efficiency of the residential floor area to cover the cost of development for that site and site development costs to be able to make it work. Yeah, it'd be pretty challenging.
Councilmember Tim Chisholm, do you have more?
Well, I guess I wasn't a part of this council when this was originally drafted, so if the resolution or the original resolution has a bunch of other things in there besides housing, then maybe we should decide at what stage we visit those things, because I think housing should be the focus of this, and bringing in too much may clutter this to the point where it's difficult. Thank you.
Thank you. Personally, we set out an ambitious agenda for this. Housing, number one priority, homeownership possibility. And we've heard from the community repeatedly through the comp plan process is we recognize that we have a need for affordable and workforce housing, and we need to build it in our neighborhood centers, which is what we are trying to do. In addition to the very real need of housing, we're also working really hard to create exciting retail and services in the neighborhood. We're creating third spaces. I live in the neighborhood. We have no place to hang out. You live in the neighborhood. Where do we go to have pizza and beer? There is no place. So the vision that we're seeing here is not only building housing, but it's also providing needed amenities for this community and this neighborhood center. And this current vision even has a park, which is a wonderful asset for this community. So you weren't part of this original, and I appreciate that. But in my mind, we are fulfilling with this vision what we set out to do. And I agree with the comments that we're hearing tonight, because we're getting great feedback. I'm looking at Lisa, we need more bike racks. I think we've got to be careful not to get so prescriptive. We can have that conversation later, but now is the time to go out and look for a development partner and get the real feedback of what we're seeing here. Is this feasible? Is this something that can be built? Is this economical? One of the things that I specifically, there are a lot of one-bedroom units. We know that in the city, we need 2 3-bedroom units, maybe 4-bedroom units. You know, how do we build that, and can we do that? Obviously, that cuts down our number of units. So if we're looking for a financial partner, is that an issue, and so forth. So I feel like now is the time to create something to put out into the development community so that we can start getting feedback before we go too far down this road and define how many bike racks and whether we're going to have a completely covered courtyard. I think that we've done a lot, and Jim, kudos to you, we've done a lot of good work of reaching out to multiple members of the community, not only the local residents, but the local businesses and so forth. I think we have the feedback. Now we need to shop this around.
Thank you. I think everything that you've hit on, we did hear throughout the outreach process. And so I just wanted to add that those voices were heard throughout everybody that participated. But I especially wanted to mention our diverse community and our CBOs, our community-based organizations, who are constantly seeking for space on where they can place different organizations and services that provide human services for our community.
Thank you. So my question to you, City Manager and Deputy City Manager, do you have enough to start moving forward? What more do you need from us?
So I think the overall question I'd ask is that, one, I think we need to do a little bit more work beyond the comments received about 3 stories versus 5 stories. I think people are just kind of interested in knowing more about that. So I think we can put something on that together. I think my question, and these two can jump in if they have additional questions, is it feels like that the option B sort of envelope instead of plazas and amenities and stuff is the concept you want to keep carrying forward, but make sure that whatever we bring back to you has enough flexibility built in that it doesn't feel so prescriptive as to what you saw in this. So to come back with language that shows some of the examples Allison gave about maybe we say this is a caveat or this is what it could be look like, but just to show you the built-in language that creates the flexibility you're seeking about housing types or ground floor uses. But I guess the go, no go to keep going, not that you've made a decision to adopt something, but to bring back a next iteration of this development plan based on this feedback.
Does that work for everybody? Okay. Councilmember Falcone?
I just want to say yes, and I'm looking forward to, like Councilmember Sweet, I believe, said, and others, like, of moving forward in conversations and with developers. I know we've had some of that in the, just data gathering phase, but like actually having those more, meaningful conversations of wanting to move forward and see what potential partnerships there are out there to get the ball rolling on that.
And I can't remember who said it was the chicken and egg. This, this whole process has been a little like that because developers are like, well, what do you want to build? So we've been working to get to like, what's the general idea before we can start to say to them, is this something you want to engage in? But I think we are at a place now where we can have those conversations and start to get more feedback.
That would be helpful.
Yes, that's what I was trying to signal. It's like, I don't want to like have another few months that we're coming
Yeah.
back and doing like the 3.0 of this to then go back out and have those conversations. I feel like we're ready for that now. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Shall we move on to the next study session, which we're going to do a briefing on Washington State middle housing compliance. And I'm just going to acknowledge it's 6:30, and can we do this in about 40 minutes? Allison says yes.
What does Scott say?
Oh, yeah, what does Scott say? Allison's the boss. Okay. Why don't you go stand by the light switch?
Wave your hand.
It's a skill.
Do you want to say anything to introduce this topic? Okay. So I believe Scott Scooter, our senior planner, is going to make the bulk of this presentation. And this is another one where we're informing the council and looking for feedback, but not looking for any kind of final decision.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. This is a briefing on the state mandated housing code compliance. This is a set of House bills and Senate bills that were passed in 2023, 2024 legislative session that actually require cities to update our development standards to accommodate more housing types, primarily middle housing typologies. Is this, okay, it's not presenting, that's why. Sorry. Right here?
Yep.
All right. Moving on. Here we go. So I have about maybe 14 slides here, so hopefully it's going to go really quick. I'm going to give you a presentation on the state requirements, followed by staff's approach to the amendment process and our approach to public engagement, follow with some next steps, and then receive some, have some questions for you that is in your meeting packet. And we're requesting some feedback on our approach. So as a reminder, this is about implementing housing legislation. This legislation is time sensitive. Most of the legislation is due for cities to amend by the middle of the year. So we have about 6 months to get this done. So the reason for the staff's approach is to just meet minimum state compliance. This sets a stage for not only how we will approach the code amendments, but also maybe our public engagement as well, due to the limited time constraints. This will be followed by, we've talked about this before, this will be followed by some optimization, a way in which we can encourage more middle housing development under the new, state standards, which would follow also a more intensive public engagement process. So I'm going to go over the 5 bills that I analyzed here. I understand that there might be a couple more bills that might be included in this. But for the most part, this is going to take care of the bulk of everything. The first one being the middle housing bill, what most people are familiar with is HB 1110, and then adjusted under engrossed substitute bill 2321. It sets new density standards for the city, primarily 4 units per lot, with an allowance up to 6 units. Some of that being affordable housing outside for most of the city, and then requiring a minimum 6 units if you're within a quarter-mile walk shed of a major transit stop. And that would be primarily what is our I-405 85th Street station area and the future K-line. This also has, this legislation also requires us to adopt a minimum of 6 out of the 9 housing types. I show these housing types on the right. This would affect all of our residential zones. So this is low density, medium density, and high density residential zones. And it sets some limited development and design standards, parking requirements, and reduced lot size requirements. It essentially levels our design standards and our development standard field with what we typically would allow by right with single-family development. So no additional standards that we would be allowed to employ on here. The state also has a model code. It has, which was some base requirements and some additional optional requirements that could be considered. These would not be customized to the city of Kirkland in our geographic area and our specific conditions. And it would not adopt any new access standards, of which I think we have because we have middle housing code already, we have learned a lot from that code, and we have some things that we would like to adjust in our access standards based on the lessons learned from those standards, and we'd like to use that and adjust those with the increased density. So those are reasons why staff would recommend kind of a more customized approach to this process. The next bill is the HB 1337, which involves accessory dwelling units. This sets a little bit of a more generous development standards. We will be adjusting our maximum unit sizes collectively to meet the standards. Our height standards would have to be adjusted. Some of our development standards, such as where it can be located on a lot, would have to be adjusted as well to meet state standards, as well as some parking adjustments that would need to be adjusted. More broadly speaking, there's residential parking standards that have been adjusted with Senate Bill 6015. This adds a lot of flexibility that would allow for tandem parking, sets some some minimum provisions to allow for alternative like driveway surfaces, and allows, and we'll have to set some make some adjustments to our non-conformance standards to allow for existing non-conforming parking to be permitted. While I know we have a separate project on this that is being handled by one of our other design review board staff members that is going to be taking on the bulk of this bill, but the local design review bill 1293 does affect some of the things that we already, some of the provisions that we have with middle housing related to how we regulate design of like cottage development specifically. We set some design parameters that are a little more subjective and discretionary that would have to be eliminated and adjusted. So those would be some minor adjustments there. And again, those would also affect maybe some of the bulk and mass kind of requirements on that too. And lastly, there's a co-living bill, 1998, which is what we typically call our residential suites. You know, it's a bill. This bill requires us to allow for this type of development by right as a standalone use for any properties that allow for 6 units or greater in our city. So you can imagine most of those areas that are already medium density, high density, or would have to be adjusted to account for these new standards, which would also adjust our parking requirements for residential suites, and would also probably, most of these changes would also be picked up probably by our adjustments to our commercial and mixed-use zones as well, which would be a separate project, and probably lumped in with the design review stuff in those zones. As for staff's approach to the amendments, we do, again, this is based on the limited amount of time that we have for this project. So we would recommend adopting just the minimum standards, leaving any kind of additional optimization for a future phase. This would allow for staff to not only adjust to these standards, but also to ramp up for permitting and all the administrative kind of process behind that, adjusting our intergov and MBP to kind of allow for all these adjustments and get acquainted with this new code. There's also additional permit streamlining project that would have to deal with as well. So that's some additional staff work that we're going to have to do on the side of this, but this would be lumped in. Ramping up for these code amendments would be ramped in with that. And then this also sets a stage. This sets a stage for future public engagement and future discussions on optimization and how we can make middle housing and other housing types a little bit easier to develop in our city. One thing I did want to talk about when it relates to the inclusionary requirement, one of the things that we probably won't be adjusting too much after this is making big changes to our density allowances. And this is going to be a pretty big density allowance from what we currently allow in our city. So staff is recommending kind of looking more closely at our inclusionary requirements, understanding that that low-density residential uses are primary, or single-family uses are primarily exempt from most of this. We generally only require affordable housing for multifamily development. This is really kind of setting multifamily across our entire city at this point in time, and so it may be worth not only looking at this from the standpoint of how we currently deal with multi-unit development, but also how we might think about maybe leveling the playing field a little bit when it comes to making reasonable a citywide inclusionary requirement potentially. The Planning Commission has made a recommendation that if we do something like this, that it might be a pioneer provision. That might be a wise thing to do, considering that we're going to be making future adjustments that might make it easier. So we might, forego, the pioneer provision we might adopt something and then forego that maybe when we felt a little more comfortable with, any kind of inclusionary requirement, we may adjust and we may adopt at this point. But want to get your kind of feedback on that. The other way of doing this would be to adopt the state requirement, which is really similar to what the city requirement is at 4 units or greater, greater than 4 units, I guess, with the state, is that you start to apply the affordable housing provision, which is very similar to what the city has at this point.
Is it mandated?
It mandates it for most of the city. It does not mandate it within the walk shed of the major transit stop. So most of the city, essentially, yes, it mandates it for that. As far as our public outreach approach, this is really, again, a more of an informed level of approach. If we decide that, just adopting the minimum state standards is the approach that we're going to take, then it should be more of an informed provision. If we decide to go beyond that, then maybe we want to think about a more involved public engagement process. But again, I would warn on the limited amount of time that we have until we have to adopt this. This approach is just basically building on what we've already, the engagement infrastructure that we've already built for the comprehensive plan, and then would set the stage for more involved public engagement at a future phase. This is what our...
Sorry, Scott, we had a...
Oh,
I'm sorry, Councilmember Tim Chisholm.
Just a quick question on what you're touching on. Are you saying we would have to adopt a city standard before the state standard goes into effect, or we can do it afterwards also?
we would have to adopt the city standard. If we want a city standard, we'd have to adopt it before the state deadline, which would be the middle of the year. Otherwise, we would just automatically adopt the state standard.
After the state standard's in place, can we modify it at any time?
We can modify it at any other point in time, but we would still have to do some other amendments. That only applies to the middle housing bill, has a model code associated with it. Other state standards, if we don't adopt the other state standards, we would have to be referring to the state RCW in order for us to enforce our own development standards for the city. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, it would be really cumbersome for us administratively.
Say, Scott, can you go lower than the state standard after June, or do you have to make that decision now? I think that's one of the questions.
Oh, lower than the state standard?
Yeah, being though the four home threshold.
I think, well, as a tier 1 city, we're going to have to meet the minimum standard, so we would have to essentially allow up to 6 if 2 were affordable by across the city. If the development were to propose 2 affordable units with that development.
Adam, did you want to?
Yeah, and I think, so, sorry, let me turn this on. Yeah, we have to meet the state requirement of 4, right, through most of the city. If there's 2 affordable units, we have to allow up to 6 units. We're not dealing with major transit stops right now. We don't have those in the city right now, so we don't have to meet that requirement.
Does that answer your question? Yeah. Councilor Sweet?
Affordable at what level?
60% of area median income.
For rentals and 80% for anything that's home ownership.
Thank you.
So very similar to what we have right now.
Councilor Falcone?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just a follow-up question to that, we don't currently have anything that would be meet the transit threshold, but we do and will in the future, or likely will, most likely will, hope we will. And so do we need to set ourselves up for success on that now? Like what is the best timing with that? Should we just have that ready to go for when that opens and have that ready to go, or do we worry about that later?
Well, we can definitely write in something that, sets the stage for any time that, a project is within a walk shed of a major transit stop, which is, state defined, We have one in construction right now. It's the Stride Station. That would be, it's logical that we put this in place right now. And even though probably the walk shed within, the Stride Station is already over the capacity of this bill, but if we set ourselves up, any future transit stop that comes in with the K line, we would apply that, and it would be a simple map that we can create for the public, to inform them of the standards where the standards apply.
Deputy Mayor?
Scott, you mentioned that the major transit stop was defined as bus rapid transit. 85th is the only future stop that we have on that. I'd note HB 1998 also adds a frequent transit 15-minute service. Do we have any service today, like the 255, that qualifies for that particular
We do.
Provision?
We do. The 255 is a frequent transit stop. It has that same frequency. I think it's 50-minute intervals.
So the co-housing provisions in 1998 are something we're going to need to think about for that route.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, so this is pretty much wrapping up most of this. Again, this is the public engagement process for phase one. This is the next step, the tentative schedule that we have set up. It sets us up to touch base with the council in about April, assuming that that we have a recommendation from the planning commission, or if the council desires us to have an additional briefing prior to the code adoption. And these are the questions that are in your packet that we would like to hear feedback on.
Thank you. Council, who wants to kick us off? Deputy Mayor, thank you.
One question on the middle housing and ADU requirements. If you look at an area of the city like Goat Hill, do we have the capability of dealing with those site-specific situations?
Yeah, so there's going to be an allowance for us. We currently have that moratorium that doesn't allow for additional densities in that particular area, and HB 1110 does allow us to exempt up to 25% of the city. That has to also include critical areas, so we'll have to see how much critical areas eat up most of this stuff as well. But we'll definitely have to include that in our analysis.
Okay. And then secondly, just as to the question, other questions here on the public engagement plan, support your recommendation on focusing on phase one on the requirements and recognizing the state mandates, there's limited flexibility we have, so the need for limited feedback. However, as I've looked at this, and I think as the community looked at this, this is going to generate a lot of ideas and conversation about future phases. I want to make sure that we're set up to capture those questions and ideas. Said, okay, it may not apply for the required piece, but as we get feedback, it's going to be good food for thought.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sweet?
Just a small note. I think I agree with the phased approach to pick up where we were with the comprehensive plan and continue the conversation. I think it is the same conversation. I think it also has to be pointed toward new legislation that is being crafted right now that is going to change it once again in a legislative session that is really geared to focus on housing. So public engagement plan, I agree. And then I think I really think this is an evolving process. We started it with the station area plan, with comprehensive planning process. We're kind of wrapped up in this for several years to come. So I really appreciate the work that you're putting into this with the recognition that it's going to be a really evolving picture.
Yeah, to that point of, we've kind of set up the website already, both the project website and adjusted the housing website so that it has an email listserv that, well, we can just build upon, and we can continue building upon this as projects come about. So any public involvement, related to that, any noticing, I'm working with David Wolbrick and his group on, any kind of additional kind of public outreach that we're going to need to engage with, using the various platforms that we employed during the comprehensive plan update. And so hopefully this will continue the conversation steadily as we, as you said, there's additional legislation out there, and most definitely we're going to be making future adjustments to our codes to accommodate those future amendments.
And Councilmember Falcone?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, thank you for this. In answer to the questions, I do agree with the phased approach. I think it just makes sense to do what's required now and then to move forward with a more robust conversation about being more proactive with this work. I had similar thoughts to Councilmember Sweet about, forthcoming potential legislation this session too, like just hearing Representative Wallen today talk about, DRB bill, right? And thinking about that and the work that you said that's being done to be compliant with the formerly adopted legislation on that. So, I mean, yes, we obviously know we need to move forward, but also, who knows what's going to happen and what requirements are going to change in the coming months for that. With the phased approach too, I know we're going to be having a conversation about the planning work program in the coming months with the Planning Commission, and I just urge us to continue to move forward in this. We've had a lot of great community input from the comp plan update that we just adopted, those updates, and also just looking at the existing planning work program. We have missing middle housing optimization as a 24 and 25 work program item. So let's continue along that, and I really don't want to see that pushed back very far. So want to just give you a foreshadowing of what my comments are going to be when we talk about that, and urging us to continue to march forward. I don't think we need additional studies for the compliance. I feel like we have the information that we have, unless there's something that I'm missing there. I agree. I think we need to, be really crystal clear with managing expectations. I agree with Deputy Mayor, like every opportunity we have to continue to gather input and document input is great, and we should do so. And to educate the public and make sure the public is really informed and we're really transparent about what we're doing, but also about managing expectations that we don't have wiggle room here, right? This is what's required by the state, and so it's really out of our hands. And so what I wouldn't want to do is to set expectations that folks can give input that is going to change what the requirements are that that we have to move forward with. So I just want to make sure we're really crystal clear with the community about that. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything? I'm going to focus on the public engagement piece, and I'm just going to echo what you just heard. I think that we need to be really careful and set community expectations about what they can influence and what they can't. And when you talk about engagement, people have an expectation that they're going to give you feedback. And so we need to be really clear about what is public engagement and what is, yes, we can, there are options here. And most of this, there aren't options here. So I just want to be thoughtful about, because we have an engagement plan and we sort of do it lockstep. And this is an opportunity to do it better and do it differently and set expectations early on. Because as we heard in some of the comp plan conversations, just don't do this. And we don't have an option. And I think we need to be clear about what non-compliance looks like and what is the impact of non-compliance, because we aren't going to do non-compliance. And when we talk about an open house, I want to be clear on what an open house is, because I feel like the CMO does an open house and it may look differently than a planning and building open house. So I just want us to be really clear and really thoughtful and take to heart some of the feedback that we received during the comp plan process.
Okay.
Anybody else? All right, we made it by 7. I know some people are going to be happy about that. So that concludes the study session for this evening. We'll be back at 7:30 for our regular meeting. Thank you, everybody. There, use the loud one. We're back in session following a study session providing an update on the Houghton Village development and a briefing of compliance with the Washington State Middle Housing requirements. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that Councilmember Pascal is not in attendance tonight and that his absence has been excused by the council earlier this evening, and I want to acknowledge that Councilmember Black has now joined us from his earlier excused absence, so welcome. We'll start tonight's meeting with our proclamation, City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. So we'll be proclaiming January 20th, 2025 as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service in Kirkland for the reasons outlined in the proclamation. I also note there's a lot of links as to where people can find ways to provide service on that day in the memo, and we are very excited to be joined by Melantha Jenkins, who is a member of our Human Services Commission and also was a proud alum of the Kirkland initiative that just ended at the end of last year. So she'll be receiving the proclamation, and she has members of her family here who will be joining us. So welcome to the whole group.
Bring your family up, Melantha.
Come on, everybody.
Nice to see you. Hi, Amy.
Come on up. Oh, yes.
Oh, I love it. Hi, honey.
Slide over a little bit
Yeah.
so everybody can be seen.
Oops.
We do that all the time. Hi, well, welcome. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Hi, hun. I'm Councilmember Amy Falcone, and I will be reading a proclamation proclaiming January 20th, 2025 as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service in Kirkland. Whereas the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was an American Baptist minister, political philosopher, and one of the most prominent leaders in the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. And whereas the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. devoted his life to advancing equality, social justice, and opportunity for all, challenged all residents to help build a more perfect union and live up to the purpose and potential of America. And his teachings continue to guide and inspire us in addressing challenges in our own communities. And whereas in 1994, Congress initiated the King Holiday and Service Act, a nationwide effort to transform the federal holiday honoring the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. into a day of community service, grounded in Dr. King's teachings that help solve social problems while focusing on bringing people together and breaking down the barriers that have divided us as a nation. And whereas serving one's community on the King holiday is an appropriate way to honor Dr. King Jr., meet local and national needs, bring our residents together, and strengthen our communities and nation. And whereas the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service is the only federal holiday commemorated as a national day of service and offers an opportunity for Americans to give back to their communities on the holiday and make an ongoing commitment of service throughout the year. And whereas, I need a moment for some lights because I can't read in the dark. Thank you. Whereas, it was just a moment to pause and reflect. Very intentional. Whereas the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service projects are being organized by a wide range of nonprofit and community organizations, educational institutions, public agencies, private businesses, and other organizations all across the nation. And whereas Kirkland community members are encouraged to participate in King Day of Service volunteer events and commit to a full year of service to their community, and can visit the city's website for volunteer opportunities. So now, therefore, Mayor Kelly Curtis, on behalf of the entire City Council, does hereby proclaim Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service in Kirkland, and calls upon the people of Kirkland, Washington to serve their neighbors and their community through participation in community service projects. Yeah, would you like to?
Yes, I prepared some remarks. you so much. Dr. Martin Luther King is known for ushering in amazing changes in our society, changing the lives in ways many thought were impossible by using peaceful protest, nonviolent protest. Dr. King used clear and objective and distinct demands to invoke national change. Many water his legacy down to 3 major points. 1, the 1964 Civil Rights Act that eliminated legal racial segregation in our great nation, making it illegal to discriminate against Blacks or other minorities in hiring, public accommodation, education, and transportation. 2, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which eliminated barriers to voting for African Americans who, in some areas, had been completely disenfranchised. And 3, the famous I Have a Dream speech, which he delivered at our nation's capital. It's often overlooked that in the last few days of Dr. King's life, he transitioned his focus and efforts, to efforts of economic justice and international peace. He formed the Poor People's Campaign. This was a multicultural coalition of impoverished Americans working together as one for economic change, for economic equality. When I look upon our city, I wonder, what would Dr. King say? I feel he would be proud that his dream, that his 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of the skin, but by the content of their character, is now the reality of my 4 little children. However, would he smile about the division within Kirkland, a city we have deemed livable and cherished deeply? Kirkland is one city with one shared future. Just as a finger is weak alone, together it makes a fist, which is strong. Yet still, 57 years after Dr. King was assassinated, I would be lying to say that the similarities between then and now astonish me. Issues regarding public accommodation, poverty, adequate housing, and transportation are still major focuses of discussion we find ourselves dealing with in 2025 on a national level, on a state level, and here in our city of Kirkland. Today, I am humbled to receive this proclamation to honor Dr. King. I honor that our city, the place where I was born, embraces his legacy, and it's my duty to remind the people of Kirkland that, as Dr. King said, God never intended for one group of people to live in superfluous, inordinate wealth, while others live in abject, deadening poverty. Look around this room. The residents that are here, plus all the ones whom are not, make our city great. We must be reminded and uplift our neighbors. We must care for our neighbors, welcome our neighbors, and communicate with our neighbors. Let us strive for the better of our community to find a middle ground, dare I say common ground, with our neighbors. Let's break bread and embrace our neighbors. Our differences and our diversity make us greater and wiser. We are Kirkland and we are one. Thank you.
Oh, she can still hold the baby. Okay. We are now moving to items from the audience. This is a time in our meeting where we normally hear from the public on matters that are not quasi-judicial or scheduled for a public hearing, of which there are none scheduled this evening. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. If you are present either in person or virtually and would like to address the council during this items from the audience period, please sign up online using the public QR code. I said that in the wrong order, but I think everybody understood me. For those participating by phone, please dial *9 to be recognized to speak. Items from the audience is an important part of our business meeting, and we ask that everyone be treated with kindness and respect. We ask that you please do not clap or applaud after a speaker or otherwise openly express your agreement or disagreement with the speaker. When that happens, even when being openly supportive of a speaker, it can be disruptive to the meeting and discourage others from sharing a different point of view. We discourage people from using obscenities and personal attacks, and we ask that you direct your comments to the council, not to staff or audience members. In addition, because they can be disruptive, signs and placards are not allowed in council chambers during our meetings, regardless of their content. Kirkland prides itself on being a respectful, welcoming community. We want everyone to feel like they belong in chambers expressing their viewpoints, regardless of content. Madam Clerk, who do we have signed up to speak?
Our first 2 speakers are virtual, and they are Jennifer Ohan and Susan Davis. And they are online.
Okay. Jennifer, welcome. Jennifer, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thank you. There's been a lot of opposition from the Houghton community to build up, I'm talking about the PCC, by the way, to build up to 5 or 6 stories on this site. It's next to Google, and even Google is only 3 stories with parking. So I just feel like it's going to be really out of place. I do think it was overzealous for the city to allow up to 5 stories in low-rise neighborhoods outside the large city centers. With that in mind, I ask you to limit the PCC development to a height of 3 stories or 4 stories at the very most. The community has been consistently asking for school programs and childcare, so I do appreciate that you put that in the design that you guys covered earlier in the study session. Lakeview is next door to the PCC site, and it's the second most populated elementary school in the district, even though it's the second smallest school. The school gets out at either 2:10 or 3:40, and I feel like most working parents cannot leave work in the middle of the day at 2:10 to pick up their kid, and so an after-school program next door would be nice, since the after-school care program at Lakeview is full with long wait lists, and private after-school programs who are willing to pick up a kid after school are very unaffordable and rare. So many families need this service. My other big concern is that Lakeview is currently pushed to its limit. It is bursting at the seams. We've lost our art room, we've lost our special needs resource room, because we need space for classrooms. And there was even discussion amongst the PTSA at the beginning of the year as to if we would have to have every school event twice, half joking but half not, because we cannot fit all the kids and parents into the school at this time. And families with children live in apartments, and I'm thinking about the PCC. And if you build 145 units, as suggested in the study session, and even if only a third of them have 1 kid, honestly, where are they going to go to school? The school district isn't revising school boundaries anytime soon. They did that last year. So where would the kids who live at the PCC site go? Lakeview just doesn't have room, and we're maxed out on portables currently. I strongly support the proposal to add a new street at the back of the site and not have ingress and egress on 68th, because I watch the kids on 68th play chicken with cars and the traffic every day on the way to school. And I think that more curb cuts on 68th would just be an absolute traffic nightmare. It already takes me like 25 to 30 minutes to drive a mile some days because 68th is so backed up. But it does concern me that it sounded like there was a requirement for 350 parking spots, if I caught that right, and yet the site would only have 180.
Jennifer, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but your time's up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Susan Davis? Susan? Susan?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Susan Davis. I've been living in Kirkland for 24 years, and I'm actually calling because about the bike valet. Just a little background of me. My husband and I got e-bikes for our 20th anniversary. So since September of 2022 up until probably last weekend, the last time I rode, I've put on over 3,300 miles riding my bike. I ride to downtown Kirkland to basically go to the different areas for exercise. I go to the farmer's market. I ride my bike to Totem Lake because I live in North Rose Hill, and I pile in all of my groceries into a backpack and I head back home. So I'm just calling because there are some things uncovered about bike valet, and I really want to make a point that I do not agree with extending the bike valet program, and especially not paying Livable Kirkland, which is also known as Kirkland Greenways now, trying to get them to get $50,000 for a sponsorship to get some stewards. So I'm just going to read part of an email that was sent on July 28th. Kurt Dresner, who's the main Livable Kirkland person, sent an email to Jim Lopez. And yes, I did talk to Jim Lopez over a month ago because I'm the North Rose Hill neighborhood chairperson, and we were talking about our expenses, and I mentioned my concerns with this because I had seen it coming up on the city council. So the email, it goes about saying, from talking to this climate network, that we could use fundraising from them to give a stipend to some high schoolers to help out with bike valet. We could recruit and hire some number of new stewards who would learn the important skill of how to run a community program, and we could turn to get some stewards who would cover more events. Presuming that the I-2117, which did pass the Climate Commitment Act, this money would be here next year. We could start defining those rules and applying to the program now. With a $50,000 grant, we could pay $5,000 stipend to 10 stewards or $10,000 stipends to 5 stewards for more work. And then he goes, or we could apply for more, smiley face. Livable Kirkland and the city could submit a joint application, but the city would have to be the fiscal agent, though. Thoughts, Kurt? First of all, Livable Kirkland is not a registered not-for-profit. Second of all, $50,000 is a lot. Now you're probably going to see a bike valet, presentation later. Let's see how many events they have for the year divided by $50,000 or even more. Again, I have had experience with using the bike valet. I refuse to use them. Oh, probably a little bit. 2 years ago, I used them. First time I had used them was, I don't know, it was like a farmer's market. And, I pull up.
Susan, your time's up.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, who do we have next?
Our next three speakers are Kurt Dresner, Kyle Sullivan, and Jennifer Loy.
Welcome.
Hello. I love having my words taken out of context. It's awesome. I'm actually here tonight to speak about something that happened yesterday. Yesterday after school, a couple of students from Finn Hill Middle School were hit by a driver in a school zone doing about 40 miles an hour. One of them wound up at Harborview. It's really tragic. And from my understanding, the driver may have been not awake at the time, which is also pretty worrisome. The reason that I bring this up is because this is one of the results of having such a car-dependent city. And we're actually doing pretty well. Like, Kirkland's pretty great compared to the rest of our region. Don't get me wrong, I love what we're doing here. especially things like the bike valet. But we need to do the best that we can, really, to give people other options. When people don't have other options, they drive even when they shouldn't, when they're impaired, when they've maybe started to age out of driving. I know my father drove probably long past when he should have stopped driving. And many of you may have heard the stories from the recent talk. Anna Zivart's talked about her grandmother, I think it was, driving long past when she was supposed to. She would pass out and drive into a ditch. This was like a regular occurrence. But when you don't give people any other choice, then they're going to drive. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping ourselves attuned to stories like this and realizing that we have to give people other options so that they can make a different choice if that's what they want to do. So that's it. I didn't really have anything much more prepared. I'm really looking forward to the talk on the bike valet, though. Thanks.
Thank you. Kyle Sullivan.
So yeah, as Kurt mentioned, 2 kids, students, were hit by a car on the street between Finn Hill Middle School and Thoreau Elementary yesterday. I mean, this is terrible. There's really no other way to say it. I hope they and their families are well supported, that they recover quickly. As you know, I'm very passionate about our streets, how people get around Kirkland, how they can do that safely. But originally I wasn't going to comment about this. I don't live in that neighborhood. I don't know these people. Maybe it's not my story to tell, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized about how this incident is unfortunately emblematic of the issues that we face throughout the city. 84th Avenue Northeast does have bike lanes, but they're just painted lines. It doesn't even have a sidewalk. There's merely a low concrete bump on one side, about the height you see in parking lots at the end of a parking stall. I'm reminded of Northeast 60th Street, which runs in front of where I went to elementary school, Ben Franklin. Northeast 60th Street doesn't even have bike lanes or a concrete bump. There's just a walkway on one side of the street and a proper sidewalk in front of the school. When I took over as NSP coordinator for my neighborhood for 2025, I heard from neighbors about collisions and near misses they see on the streets near Lake Washington High School, which is also nearby. My brother and I both walked to our elementary school, and we rode our bikes to middle school and high school. One day, my brother was hit by a car turning right while he was on his bike. Luckily, it was very low speed, and so he was practically uninjured, but if the circumstances had been just a little different, it would have been my family with a kid in the hospital. Kirkland does have a lot of plans on the books for what improvements we need to make to achieve safe streets, but the backlog is simply huge. We need to take every opportunity we can to pick smart projects, find funding, and get these improvements built. Yesterday is a clear show of what's at stake. Will someone I know, or someone you know, be the face behind one of these headlines one of these days? Please make our streets safe and protect our most vulnerable community members. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Next, we have Jennifer Loy.
The Caroline Woods Park Chronicles, The Disagreement, Part 4. At the early June meeting with Zawagstra, I was told that the park was cleaned up quite a bit and that they would keep it at that level but nothing more. Was I fine with that? I said no. Work had commenced, but I explained that much of it was weed whipping, which was out of compliance with the park plan guidance, and that the current state included 72 hours of volunteer work that I was associated with. In a follow-up email, Zawagstra stated that there were 2 constraints to a higher level of service. One, quote, a disagreement on the intention of the landscaping and what service level it should receive. Did I not find and present overwhelming city documentation that makes it crystal clear what the intention and level of service should be? 2, quote, resource constraints. Staff are currently working at peak workload, quote, once we get through the summer, we'll send staff over, quote, We have increased the time and attention dedicated to Caroline Woods and commit to maintaining it at its current level, and then a mention of requesting more budget. Is there no accountability? Is this disagreement strategy acceptable? Disagree that the park was in disrepair. Disagree that it's a neighborhood park. Disagree that a neighborhood park should be safe and well-maintained. Disagree that the park has a high score. Disagree with the pros plan. Disagree with the landscape plan. Disagree with Caroline Woods Park stewardship plan. Disagree with the 20-year forest and natural areas plan. Instead of me asking you to change the comp plan classification of Caroline Woods from a natural area to a neighborhood park, shouldn't it have been the park director requesting your approval to deviate from the pros plan? Now imagine an escalated issue with the homelessness response team going through the same chain of command. I responded on June 18th, quote, "As a resident, it doesn't feel good to be misdirected by so many city employees or learn that somehow the governing documents and plans put forth from the City Parks Department are merely window dressing, quickly tossed aside if inconvenient. What a disaster." Despite the director's alleged constraints, before the end of June, there was a multi-day, multi-visit effort to rehabilitate Caroline Woods. Huge piles of mulch, massive cutting back and clearing of invasive species. After that, there was a tour scheduled with the Parks Board.
Thank you. City Clerk?
Our next three speakers are Tarny Navarro, Ken McKenzie, and David Haynes.
Thank you. Tarny?
Do you mind if I turn this around so I can see the time, or do you guys need to see it?
You can turn around because I can respond to the lights.
Okay. So I'm here to talk about New Year's resolutions, specifically for civic engagement. So I have 10+1 New Year's resolutions. Enjoy good parks, places, and streets every day, not just during special events. Your very presence and engagement adds vitality, life, and safety to a place and helps them be more enjoyable for everyone. Before you oppose something, such as well-designed density, new housing choices, or affordable housing, think carefully about who it's meant to help and put yourself in their place. Choose different ways to get around. Walk, bike, skateboard, scooter. Take public transit as many times a week as you can. Take public transit whenever you can, and while you're at it, look around and engage with the real, honest humanity on display. Before you indulge the urge to complain about too much traffic, accept the truth that I'm not stuck in traffic, I am traffic. Support local arts and culture with your feet and dollars every day so you won't have to fight to save them when they're under threat of closure. Champion parklets in front of your favorite stores or cafes, restaurants, converting a parking space to a people place. This one's near and dear to my heart. Rethink whether we really need the size of a house we think we need. 800 to 1,400 square feet works just fine for many family sizes. Advocate to your city council to provide reduced fees or incentives or some such thing to folks to build smaller homes or fourplexes on a single lot. Get involved with or create community and advocacy organizations, especially ones that are for things, not just against things. When it's budget time at City Hall, pay really close attention. It's where the truth of your city's aspirations is revealed. Insist that your political leaders show in detail how their spending decisions actually match the city vision they've approved in their plans. And, of course, the +1, vote. Municipal elections. In municipal elections, too many of us don't vote at the government level that most affects our actual lives on a daily basis, which is you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken McKenzie. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you. Madam Mayor and Deputy Mayor and Council, thank you for having this. So I'm here to talk about zoning changes to conform to the relatively recent RCW changes. And I think it's generally understood that Kirkland is in pretty good shape. Some changes are needed. We have some work to do, but we're not in bad shape. And I was inspired by this during the study session when the community was sort of cautioned to control its expectations about how much input it could have as the city works through the zoning changes associated with implementing the new laws. And that inspiration left me to think about, well, that's true, that's fair. We need to be reasonable. We realize we're not going to change state law in the city council. And at the same time, there's a flip side to that. There's a counterpoint. And that is that we've seen over the years that zoning changes are sort of like peanuts or M&Ms or cashews, that it's hard for the city to have just one. It has to have another, and then another, and then another. And it has a tendency to expand the scope of its work beyond what's really required, especially when it's an issue of importance to a particular staff person or council person. So I think we need to bear in mind the flip side of the community having reasonable expectations about this process, and that the staff and the council needs to restrict its actions and its work to the minimum changes that are required to implement the state law. This is not an opportunity to overindulge in changes. This is an opportunity to be efficient, to get done what needs to be done in order to implement the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have David Haynes. I see him on his way in. Welcome.
Thank you. David Haynes. I wanted to address the traffic that's frustrating the whole community to the point where a majority of the housing speculators have flash mobbed and sabotaged what has come out of the Planning Commission's influence on the designs of buildings that are too low to the ground, that the commercial operations impact the residential zoned areas that justify going higher than 6 levels. The thing is, if you just take a look at Juanita Drive and 98th Avenue, where it goes up over past Forbes Creek to Market Street and over to Central Way, right before the holiday season, rush hour traffic caused between 20-minute and 40-minute delays going from downtown Kirkland to Juanita Drive, specifically because a majority of the traffic in the evening rush hour has to turn left on Juanita Drive, and there's only 10 cars worth of the lane, and then everything turns red, and the entire backed up traffic all needs to turn left. So I think that city council and maybe the mayor or the managers need to get the traffic cops and SDOT to come out to that intersection and expedite a customized approach to allowing a priority for the left turn lane when traffic starts picking back up after the holidays, to expedite all the people trying to go home to Juanita Bay. In the evening, it's very difficult to turn left there, and it's backed up all the way to like downtown Kirkland pretty much. And there's other areas. And I realized that if you had the traffic cops out there and SDOT taking a calculation of how long it takes to clear out the traffic within a reasonable amount of time, you could adjust an advanced traffic light to prioritize that in the evening rush hour versus the morning rush hour. And it would help alleviate the frustration with the whole community thinking that if they're waiting in traffic, leaving Juanita Bay, and it's rolling at between 2 and 5 miles an hour before they turn right onto like 98 that turns into Market Street, and they're afraid that if there's a building that goes up in front to the right, They imagine 162 cars pulling out in front of them. And so they come to City Hall with a petition and say, you can't build anymore. You have to go higher. But one thing you got to consider is where you have like a retrofitted patchwork on the construction sites that impact the community and put like noise abated walls right in between where people are residentially living and they're banging and clanging like before 7 a.m. all day long. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. City Clerk?
Our next three speakers are Nicole McKenzie, Alex Zimmerman, and Cindy Claypool.
Oh, just one other thing. Could you turn up the, return the...
Mr. Haynes, I'm sorry, your time is up.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say
you-
that Juanita Beach
you're-
needs the video police light
we-
return because there's some creeps walking around.
Mr.
checking on the
Haynes,
kids
you're
on the
disrupting our meeting. Thank you.
But without the blue lights flashing, bothering everybody else.
Welcome.
Thank you. So, good evening, Mayor Curtis, Deputy Mayor, Council. Brief comments tonight, and just talking about the bike valet. First, I want to say, hey, I think it's great that we had some community members who came up with an idea to try to make it easier for people and to encourage people to ride their bikes and take their bikes to different events. It is a drain on city resources, as was noted in the memo from staff for the packet tonight. And I think that there are other things that can be done that would be more likely to be useful on a broader scale, long-term, not just at specific events. And that is, we really need to prioritize putting in more and usable bike racks throughout the city. That's something that my daughter, when she started working at Five Stones a couple of summers ago, and we were encouraging her to ride her bike, it was a question of, well, where can she store the bike? There are not really any good options for her. So that's what I would encourage is let's really look at solving this problem on a more permanent and citywide basis that allows for people to have a good place to keep their bikes, regardless of whether it's a city-sponsored event or just they're coming down to go to their job or go to a restaurant. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Alex Zimmerman.
Yeah, Happy New Year. My name is Alex Zimmerman, and I am president of Stand Up America and Trump supporter for 10 years from beginning in every my election. Yeah. I want to speak about something right now, what is I never speak before, I probably never speak again. But it's very important because, like a gentleman, I need clean situation, what is we have right now here. So, I start clean this now. Thank you very much. So last meeting is Joe Kensley make a comment in humor, and I very appreciate you. Answer him, so you have probably something what is, for my understanding, better than nothing. Yeah, I'm okay with this. So Joe Kensley is a speak about me for last 20 years in every meeting, make a video, complain, and everything. And I never talk about this like this. Why? Because he disabled man. He born with brain damage, Down syndrome, and he approximately 45-year-old right now, but brain he is like a child. He went from this, it's not my opinion, it's a doctor opinion. You can find this on internet. Yeah, it's a maniac syndrome. So this is not a point, you know what it means. So I don't want talking about him or mayor, you know what it means decision. But after this meeting, when I start speaking, somebody from this side, you know what it means, start interrupt me. So this is exactly what is I want to speak right now. It's not about Kinsley or mayor opinion, you know what it means. It's about, so you start interrupt me right now. So this is very important, because when come Trump start elect 1 month ago, go to internet. In internet, all internet right now talking, so Democrat acting like a mob, like a criminal, like a bandita. It's never happened before, and I live here for 40 years, and I stay in politica for all my life. So situation very simple. Guys, you can do in everything what is you want. Yes, but please don't broken law. Don't play stupid. So you don't understand what is mean constitution, what is doesn't court opinion, and what is America about. For this I support Trump, because we need clean, dirty government, the most dirty government what is we have right now, exactly in King County, because they are fascist or Democrat. It's exactly what's happened. So I want to speak right now to everybody who listen to me. Guys, we need stop and support Democrat, because people who support Democrat, to me look right now like a pure bandita, like a criminal. Thank you very much for your time. Viva Trump.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our last speaker is Cindy Claypool.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. I just wanted to bring to people's attention that an alternative to bike valet would be secured bike lockers. These also protect bikes from the weather. They can be self-operated. They could be placed throughout the city. Again, as we've said, encouraging people to use their bikes more since they would have a secure place. Hopefully, unlike bike locks, which bolt cutters seem to be a much more commonly carried tool by thieves these days. Even your best bike lock is vulnerable. So anyway, please look into bike lockers.
Thank you. All right, City Clerk, anyone else?
There is no one else signed up at this time.
All right, I am going to now close items from the audience, and we are going to move on to special presentations. On your published agenda, we have a special presentation from Cascadia College President Dr. Eric Murray. He was going to present a State of the College address. However, Dr. Murray is unable to attend tonight. So I know you are disappointed. I know Councilmember Sweet is. So we will move his presentation to another meeting. And we'll move next to our special presentation on the Bike Valet Volunteer Program. City Manager.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Before I get to that, some of you noticed the lights went out and went back on again. I forgot to mention at the beginning that this started happening during the study session. We have a faulty sensor, which we cannot fix tonight. So periodically, the lights are going down, and Quinn from our city clerk's office will turn them back on again. So if you have that interruption, that's what's going on, and we'll hopefully fix it in the next few days. But with that, our special presentation is our Bike Valet Program Steward, Lisa McConnell, who's going to report on the results of the Bike Valet Program. So, welcome, Lisa.
Welcome, Lisa.
Good evening, Mayor Curtis and council members. Thank you for allowing me to come tonight to give you a brief review and synopsis of an exciting new program, a pilot program, the Bike Valet, that the city and volunteers from Livable Kirkland conducted last year. So just what is Bike Valet? Bike Valet volunteers set up a safe, secure area at an entrance to an event that include bike racks and a space for parking your bike. You roll up to the Bike Valet. The volunteer takes your bike or your scooter or your wagon or your even strollers, and we hand you a ticket, as seen on here. That's it. We watch your bike while you go to the market or to restaurants or to shopping. And you come back, you hand us your tag, and we hand you back your bike, safe and secure. We did take some basic data at a few events to get an idea of volume, peak usage, types of bikes, and some general observations. The Street Scramble was one event, and it began in late April and ran until June 8th, with 8 total days we recorded. The Wednesday Market ran from June to September 4th, with 6 days that we recorded. 73 bikes total used the bike valet on the 14 recorded days. We assumed an average ride to the valet of about 2 miles. For our calculations, we used 0.07 pounds per mile carbon emissions output for bikes and 0.96 pounds per mile for an equivalent if a car had made the trip. This is based on U.S. Department of Transportation figures for carbon emissions. We had a savings of nearly 130 pounds of carbon from the 14 events that we recorded. Finally, we tallied the number of hours that volunteers contributed to this pilot program from April to October through the year, a whopping 283 hours from essentially 5 stewards. One of the first times Kirkland saw a bike valet was at the grand opening of the Totem Lake Connector, which I know all of you were at. It was a huge success. And it was a service run by Livable Kirkland and Kirkland Greenways, 2 separate groups. The huge success led to the launch of the Bike Valet program the following year. The first Bike Valet was during the Street Scramble construction, which we all remember and hope to forget, which closed down Lake Street and Kirkland Avenue. We had the Bike Valet there to encourage people to continue to come to downtown in something other than a car, since the intersection was closed. The Bike Valet was set up next to the Lake and Central parking lot at the entrance to Park Lane. At Wednesday Market, we started next to the Marina Pavilion, and then we moved over to our final location at the lift station platform. We were at Summer Outdoor Movies, at Denny Fest, and See Spot Splash. Unfortunately, the dogs did not ride their bikes to See Spot Splash. We were at City Hall for All and the Harvest Festival. The Harvest Festival was the most successful single event for Bike Valet. Bike Valet was advertised in the event promotions, so more people were aware that the service was going to be available ahead of time. We had a total of 38 bikes parked for nearly 68 pounds of carbon emissions saved that day. This is not including the 4 kid scooters that use the service, because we have a hard time estimating carbon emissions for that one. It also means that 38 extra car parking spots were available for people attending the Harvest Festival. What would we like to see for the future of the Bike Valet program? First, integration, promotion, and advertising of Bike Valet service into events programs. When people know and expect a secure and safe bike parking at an event in the city, they can choose to ride instead of drive, knowing that they will have parking when they get to their event. Second, we'd like a dedicated place to store the small amount of equipment that we have. Logistically, it was really hard to rotate storage and access of equipment between the 5 lead stewards. It currently resides in my garage. If the program grows and has more volunteers, we'll need a central place to store and access the minimal amount of equipment we need. One of our lead stewards can actually fit all the equipment in his cargo bike. It's a minimal amount of equipment for a major amount of impact. And speaking of equipment, for well under the cost of 1 surface lot car parking spot, about 150 additional people last year were able to easily go downtown or shop at the farmer's market or attend an event without a vehicle parking. In terms of increased capacity at events and decreased traffic congestion looking for parking, the return on investment of bike parking program is huge. We'd also like to expand the volunteer base and make use of event leads and high school interns to run and lead the Bike Valet. Thank you for allowing me to talk about this exciting new service opportunity. I had a great time last year with my fellow stewards and talking to people in Kirkland who use the bike valet program. I hope it continues in 2025.
Thank you. Council, any questions for Lisa? Councilmember Sweet?
Lisa, thanks for the presentation. I've been looking forward to it. I wonder, and I'm just thinking about the volunteers, but I kind of think of what the international school has been incredibly involved in our sustainability process, and have sustainability ambassadors involved in their curriculum. And I'm just wondering whether that is not somebody that you could reach out to. We could give you contact information in terms of bringing some more folks online.
Definitely a consideration for moving the program forward. That's part of the high school stewards. There are interns at events that we can tap into. There's a lot of opportunities for youth to get involved here, as well as other volunteers. So if you guys have any other ideas about increasing our volunteer capacity, because it's unsustainable with 5 people running it, it would be great if it turned out to be as successful as the Green Kirkland program. That's my goal, is that this is kind of a portable event and a service opportunity for people in Kirkland. The nice thing about bike valet, as opposed to like secure facilities, is you can move it around to different events and different occasions and talks, and Kirkland's Performance Center. You could set it up just about anywhere when any amount of people are gathering. So it's certainly not our only solution for bike parking, but it is a really nice, elegant program that we found out this year, and it works really well.
Okay, I will send you contact information.
Excellent, thank you.
Like-minded individuals.
Oh, Councilmember Falcone?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, great question, Councilmember Sweet, and thank you, Lisa, for the presentation. A follow-up question to that: are there currently guidelines on who can volunteer, like age requirements, or signing up a form or something like that?
It's in the same volunteer sign up online with other volunteer service events. So it's already in the system. Anybody can volunteer for these. It's in the calendar and already in the system for Kirkland volunteer programs.
Thank you. So similar perhaps to Green Kirkland, where it's, 14 and up, don't have to have a grown-up with them. Under 14 can do it, but with a grown-up there to kind of help supervise, fill out a form. At least I think that's what our current process is for that, because I frequently hear from middle school students who are looking for volunteer hours, and so was just curious, that particular population, yes, the high school, but I think the middle school population as well.
So we already have it established through the current volunteer program.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I will gladly share that out to some folks who have been asking me recently.
We'd love to see them.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Lisa, for coming tonight. I know, given our busy fall business schedule, we've bumped you, and really appreciate your patience. It's been great to see.
And you've had a few things to deal with.
I also wanted to thank you and the other stewards for the 283 hours of volunteer time. The way that the city values volunteer hours using a state standard, this is a $10,649 contribution to our city. So as we look at expanding a program, and don't know the details of what came out on public comment, but appreciate your ideas and looking for state funding to expand and look for how we can do more of this. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to add, I'm really grateful for this program, and I'm grateful for community volunteers that will step forward and say, I have an idea and I want to provide a service for the community in a positive, inclusive way. And you guys have really done that. So congratulations and success on the program. And I'm looking forward to seeing it grow over the years. So well done.
I as well. And I hope that happens in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We are now moving to the consent calendar. Before we have a motion, I'd like to ask Deputy Mayor Arnold to present audit of the accounts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We had payroll in the amount of $4,863,289.82. and bills in the amount of $11,538,706.94.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move to approve, not improve, the consent calendar.
Did I say approve?
Second.
All right.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
I would like to pull the minutes from the December 10th regular meeting.
Okay, I was going to ask you to do that after we did this, but okay. Is there a second?
Isn't that part of the consent calendar?
Yeah, I know. My script's all.
She's improving it.
Okay, so Deputy Mayor has made a motion to approve item 8A2 from the consent calendar to move it to the business agenda. Did you ask to move it to, or both?
Madam Mayor,
Yes,
no need to have a motion on removing it. It just gets removed at the request of any council member.
thank you. Okay, we have pulled 8A2. So we will now approve the amended consent calendar. It has been moved by Councilmember Sweet, second by Councilmember Falcone. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent calendar, amended consent calendar is approved 7-0. Okay. We're moving on to business. Look at us, before 9 o'clock. We are now moving on to our regular business agenda. Our first item is the 2025-2030 Transportation Improvement Plan Program Adoption. City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. As you may recall, we held the public hearing on this as part of the CIP process last year, but we have to adopt it in the fiscal year of 2025. So this is basically a repeat of what you saw in the process in November and December. But here to walk you through what's in the TIP and we're looking for your adoption is our Capital Project Supervisor, Laura Drake, joining us virtually. So welcome, Laura.
Welcome,
Good
Laura.
evening. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and City Council. I'm Laura Drake, Capital Project Supervisor, here tonight to present the 2025 through 2030 Transportation Improvement Program. The TIP is a reflection of the transportation components of the Capital Improvements Program and is consistent with the Capital Facilities Plan. For a transportation project to receive state or federal grants, it must be listed in the adopted TIP. As a brief reminder, a public hearing on the TIP was held in November and the CIP was adopted last month. With no comments received on the draft TIP, staff recommends the approval of Resolution R5666 to adopt this TIP. The exhibits to the resolution, including the map, are the same as what was included in the public hearing. The pie chart shown on this slide highlights the categories of funded projects within the TIP, with the majority addressing capacity and maintenance needs. If the City Council adopts the TIP, staff will transmit it to the 4 agencies listed on this slide, thus completing the city's requirement for 2025. Are there any questions?
Council? I'll entertain a motion.
Move resolution 5666.
Second.
And moved by Councilmember Sweet, second by Councilmember Black to move forward Resolution 5666. Is there any discussion? The question is on the motion to approve Resolution 5666. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Laura, that was the quickest presentation you've ever done. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
All right, we are now going to move on to amendments to the International Fire Code on item 9B. City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So here to give you the presentation is our Assistant Fire Marshal, Jason Chappell. So coming up, and this is to adopt requirements that came about from action by the state. The city needs to adopt.
Good evening, council staff. My name is Captain Chappell. I'm the Assistant Fire Marshal of the City of Kirkland. Just as a background knowledge, in case I'm not trying to insult anybody, but the International Fire Code comes out as a model code. We're currently in the 2021 code cycle. The state further adopts it and amends it, and then the local municipalities do so as well. We have presented a few amendments here for the city of Kirkland that we'd like to have proposed. I had a PowerPoint, not sure how to use it, but I can,
We have help for you.
well, I don't know that I need it for myself, but we have highlighted some of the major elements from the model code, and then we have highlighted a few of our local amendments that we'd like just for presentation here. Perfect. Notable changes here, Section 320 was added to the model code and has to do with 3D printing. This is really in major facilities. We currently do not have any in Kirkland, but this is a new section that's come up. Section 510 is the emergency responder communication. We often refer to that as our DAS systems, firefighters for their safety in communicating in buildings. Kirkland and several jurisdictions on the east side have had significant amendments for this section over the years. The model code has adopted a big portion of that, and we're just kind of bringing it in from the model code. Section 1207 is new from the 2018 edition of the code cycle. It pulls out the the energy storage systems, all the various requirements through Section 12, and brings them into a single section, brand new section of 1207, and further defines some testing facilities and some of the things that have just been a little ambiguous in the previous sections and editions of the code. Chapter 33, Kirkland has had a pretty substantial amendment to this chapter, building safety under construction. The model code is adopted and actually brought forth a lot of those, and so we're bringing in those additional measures in with our local amendments. Probably the three biggest elements that we're putting forward as local amendments are code compliance. The first one is just adopting the name of the Kirkland Fire Prevention Bureau as the code compliance agency. We're adding an operational permit for a positive alarm sequence, which is really, it adds a human element to a current alarm event. We don't want hospitals going off and announcing, while the doctor's in the middle of surgery. So the PAS allows for a human intervention. If an alarm goes off, a human being actually has to travel, secure the alarm, identify if there's an actual event, and correspond with dispatch. If there is no authentication by staff on site, it goes into an active alarm and fire trucks will roll. The next section up here is violations. Currently, in the past, the fire code and our local amendments have actually had all of our penalties and everything as a misdemeanor, criminal, and we've not had a whole lot of authority for correcting violations out in the world there. So we're looking at bringing in some civil infraction enforcement, so that if we have fire safety systems out there that are prolonged deficiency, 60 days, 90 days, we've not had any real enforcement capability outside of using PD for misdemeanors. And so we're aligning our local amendments with the current KMC Section 112 with the code enforcement section. And I've heard there's been a lot of questions. We proposed a operational permit for gates across roadways. And I think there's been a lot of questions and concerns, and potentially we were talking about over the roads and things like that. And what we're actually looking at are our active response and enforcement ability to, up here we have an example of Kirkland, the fuel pumps at the Kirkland Maintenance Center. Jade Apartments has a click to enter, and then the old cannery project has gates across the fire department access road. They're open normally during operating hours, but at the evening when they close it for their own security, this just allows us to be able to get in and respond to these buildings and things like that. So these are not gates on roadways, they're actually on the property themselves, but it just allow us to get through. And we have 3 different versions: click to enter, Knox box, and then we have some key cards. So super fast. I don't know if you have any other questions. I'm standing here. Let me know what you have.
We do have questions.
Perfect.
Councilmember Sweet.
Just got done with a whole lot of doorbelling and ran into a lot of homes that have gates.
Single-family dwellings?
Correct.
Yes.
So what do we do there?
All gates, commercial properties, residential properties, and single-family dwellings, during their construction element, they procure a building permit The gate is reviewed, identified, and permitted to go in, and then we're trying to just do an annual maintenance, and that's our operational permit, is just to make sure that that gate still functions over the course of time, so that we can respond and get to the property, especially some of the longer driveways up on the lake and things that they put a gate out front, and it's quite a distance to their house. We just want to make sure the gate functions and operates, and that's all we're after. Did I answer the question?
You answered the question. What I'm interested in is how the impact on response time.
Rather minimal, in that on a lot of our commercial properties, we have a click to enter, which means our radios in approach to the apparatus, we just click our radios on a standard frequency and the gates open automatically. Jade is a click to enter. Maintenance center is a key card. Somebody jumps out, flashes their key card, and it opens on the delay that it's already there, or a Knox box key. And we're very familiar with using our Knox box keys. There's a switch, put a key in, flip it, and the gate opens. So even with a residential, the delay in us responding is really minimum.
And finally,
Yes.
If I put a gate in and follow all the rules, do I get to pay something extra for the pleasure?
I understand there's a nominal fee annually. It's about $140 for an operational permit, the maintenance. We are actually looking at some potential options of, and I haven't spoken with the fire chief about it, but internally we're looking at some potential self-assessment, self-testing, and the ability to provide proof that it functions to keep these costs down, especially for single-family dwellings.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Captain. I will entertain a motion.
Am I good?
You can, yeah. Anybody want to?
Madam Mayor, I move ordinance 4889.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Deputy Mayor, second by Council Falcone to move ordinance 4889. Is there any further discussion? City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Tim Chizen.
Aye.
Councilmember Black.
Yes.
Councilmember Sweet.
Yes.
Councilmember Falcone.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
And Mayor Curtis.
Yes, ordinance carries 7-0. We are doing great. We are now moving on to our next, Councilmember Black?
For the record, it's 6-0.
Did I say 7-0? I think I've been saying 7-0 all
That's
night.
okay. I've been recording it 6-0.
And you finally corrected me. Thank you. It's just a habit. Our next item is proposed updates to city council policies and procedures. City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Share, wasn't I?
So this presentation was really going to be made by David Wolbrecht, but he is ill today, so our Deputy City Manager of Operations is filling in as an awesome substitute, so we appreciate that. So Julie Underwood is going to be walking you through, this is a continuation of a conversation you've had throughout most of last year, and the focus of these particular ones are on items from the audience discussion, as well as council meeting reports at the end of the meeting. And I'll be asking for any other things the council would like to look at in the future. So with that.
Good evening, council. I wish David was here, but I'm happy to be before you to talk about some of the changes that you have already spoken about, items from the audience, and council, regional, and committee reports. Here is the proposed policy language regarding public comment or items from the audience. So let me pause rather than read it. You've read it, and so let me know if this is ready for you to adopt it in a future, hopefully, consent item.
Thank you. This is the part where you just stand there and then we.
Yes.
All right. Anybody have some comments on this revised proposed policy language? And this is a follow-up to our May 30th meeting.
And September, yeah.
May 7th
Yep.
meeting, and where we had a long discussion about this. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. City Manager?
Sorry, I apologize. I think in the this is not the most latest version I think we had in the council packet. There was a remark about people who might need more time for accommodation subject to the mayor. So let me find that and read that for you. But otherwise, the rest of it's the same. So it's up right after the 3-minute piece.
That's not the last item there? Sorry about that.
No.
Okay. Other comments while I find this real quick?
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Do
you're
you want
right.
to bring it up for the audience?
That's right.
So, anybody have comments on this portion of the language?
So I can read the sentence. The sentence in addition, so after each speaker limited to 3 minutes, the proposal from the council feedback last time was to add this language. Persons that require special accommodations to address the council shall be allowed more than 3 minutes, subject to reasonable time limitations at the discretion of the presiding officer. And then the rest is what you see here.
Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I just want to thank you for adding that. I know this is something that I've advocated for and that council has supported to be more inclusive and really just align with our values of being inclusive and making sure that folks with disabilities in the community are able to request and receive accommodations based on their specific needs. So thank you for that. It is very relevant here. I know we have elsewhere in city policies and procedures to have accommodations. Of course, there's legal requirements for ADA compliance, but the city also strives to go above and beyond in being truly inclusive. So thank you for that. I think this helps reflect our values of that. We also have updated on the city website instructions under public comment on how folks can request accommodations and just language around that we do welcome folks to request accommodations, not limited just to this, but in general, whatever those accommodation needs may be. So not for work tonight, but I do at some point, and I defer to the city manager on this, would like to personally take a look and see if there's something worth bringing back in a future conversation on council policies and procedures, if it's necessary to additionally have a more general comment in our policy or language in our policy around being inclusive and around requesting accommodations, whether that be for speaking for items from the audience, in addition to, because obviously needing more than 3 minutes as an accommodation is one example. There may be others, but also just in attending council meetings or other things related to council business. So just wanted to put a pin in that we could potentially come back, but I'd like to just have further discussion with staff on on reviewing what our current policies are to see if it's something that warrants another discussion at another council meeting sometime in the future. So I want to just share that publicly. I do not wish to delay this any further, but just wanted to make that known that conversation may come back at another point in time.
And thank you, because that's what I wanted to clarify, is you're comfortable with the current language for now?
Correct. This addresses this specific need for what we're discussing with the limitation of 3 minutes. So I think that's very appropriate here. There just may be more to come depending on that analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Just want to note, sorry, that Emily was able to put the actual memo up on the screen so you can actually see the language. So,
Thank you, Emily.
Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Julie. I have a related question on this topic of items from the audience. We did get some public comment via email that someone had suggested some language that the city of Redmond uses around their items from the audience. When we discussed this last year, we decided we did not want to limit discussion to items on the agenda. That's something that some special purpose jurisdictions do. But one thing that Redmond does has in their procedures is they limit comments to city business, where city business is considered something germane to the ongoing and regular operations of the city and/or topics that would routinely involve the government of the city of Redmond. And I wanted to, since we all had received some email on this, I wanted to ask the city attorney, one is some language like that fit under how we've looked at some of the First Amendment issues and public comments, and if there was any other consideration for something like that.
Yeah, happy to give some information. The language like Redmond's, other agencies around the area have some restrictions similar to that, are certainly within the ability to impose and not have a First Amendment issue. The issue that I would flag is the workability of those. sort of deciding what is or isn't within city business. The Redmond's is a little more specific and tries to say, general and regular. I think that opens a space for some of the things that you do just on the legislative agenda that may not be your regular course of business, or that you end up bringing a resolution forward. So it's restrictive in its own way accidentally, where you might actually want to allow people to speak on topics that you're interested in but don't fit within that space, and then deciding where that line is sort of opens up some liability for when you're cutting someone off or when you say that's not within. And lots of the time, I think agencies experience someone identifying something related to city business in a small way, and you have to decide, imposing that on the mayor in particular or the council if you wanted to make it so that people voted on whether it was germane, sort of interrupts the flow and just to present some workability issues. So you could certainly consider adopting that, though. There's not a First Amendment issue with saying you need to be related to city business. That sort of would be within the space of acceptable regulation.
Thank you very much, City Attorney. I'm not prepared to propose that at this time. I like what we have here, but just given that it's been part of something we've received public comment on, I wanted to get on the record some of the considerations of why we're not pursuing anything else at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Tim Chisholm?
Well, I would support Deputy Mayor Arnold in proposing that, and I would volunteer myself as the enforcement officer for the city of Kirkland on that matter.
Not happening.
I'm comfortable with that. The 45-minute provision I'm in favor of. I just like to see it uniformly enforced, maybe by the city manager or the deputy clerk or the mayor if she wants to. But we've tried this in the past, and we've gone way past our marked times. So I would want to see that be consistent.
Thank you. I'll rebut when it's my turn.
All right.
Anyone else? Okay. I'm comfortable with this language, and I appreciate Deputy Mayor bringing this up. I actually spoke to a Redmond council member last night who said despite their change in their policy, no behavior has changed. And they are still getting the same public comments that we're getting, and they are running into circumstances where there's conversations about, is this city business or not? Also today, I spent time in the King County Council chambers, who has the exact same policy and uses specifically the language about comments must be germane to city business. Exact same experience with the exact same individual. So I think that it's a nice try, but it's not going to be successful. And as the city attorney said, it's going to create more disruption as we have ongoing conversations with community members about whether that's city business or not. And frankly, my goal is that people come to us and communicate about whatever issue is on their mind. And I feel strongly that even that freedom of speech and freedom of expression is a constitutional right, and it's something that we should support. So I'm not in favor of changing our rules to city business. I respect that sometimes there are comments that make us uncomfortable, our audience members uncomfortable. There was an incident at Redmond City Council meeting where I was called something that made me uncomfortable. But again, that is that person's constitutional right to say whatever they want to say, though we all would prefer that we all be kind and respectful. So I'm supportive of this new language.
Wonderful. Ready for me to move on to your last one?
Oh, I didn't address Councilmember Tim Chisholm. That one incident, we had 2 speakers left, and I thought it was very unfair to cut them off. So there will be presiding officer discretion.
Well,
So your final one is regarding reporting out to the community, regional and committee reports. You wanted to make sure language was added so that you could expand what you were reporting out on. And so this language includes that, that change. Any questions about?
Council, any comments, questions? We talked about this one quite a bit too. I'm hearing nothing.
Comfortable with this? Okay. And then just as,
Can you go back a slide, please? Sorry. Okay, yeah, thank you.
all right, so we will come back. We will put this on hopefully consent calendar. And then just as a reminder, you wanted to spend some time talking about social media usage. We'll bring that back. I think we're maybe planning for the council retreat, a discussion item on that. And then just, are there any other items that you want us to bring back before you?
Council? At our retreat or at some point, I just want to follow up on my earlier conversation or comments about public engagement. And we've talked throughout this year on other ideas of public engagement, such as providing formal and informal opportunities for public engagement. Councilmember Falcone has talked about council coffees, informal times where people can just drop in and talk to us and they're set. Councilmember Black has talked about quarterly town halls that are scheduled in advance, that staff and council members are there, and we discuss current issues, hot topics, and we have our newsletter, and how do all of those things tie in? So I think it's and we now have a new comp plan policy about two-way public engagement conversation. So I think it's time that we just sort of brainstorm and talk about some of these ideas. Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just echo my comments earlier that perhaps the council retreat may be a potential opportunity to bring back if there's additional discussion on disability accommodations related to council policies and procedures. Thank you.
Councilmember Tim Chizen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just personally don't favor bringing up the social media issue again. I think we brought it up several times. It usually leads to a 30 to 60, unless if there's a member of council that has a real specific idea on it. But we've had conversations, they've just not gone anywhere. And it usually takes us 30 to 60 minutes to decide it's not going anywhere. So if somebody feels passionately about it and has a specific item on it, fine, but
I don't think anyone at the dais disagrees with you, but I'll check in with Councilmember Pascal before we make that decision.
okay, thank you. I have his proxy tonight, and I will, I think we can go forward.
All right, Julie, anything else?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now moving on to our last business item, which was just added, item 8A2, the meeting minutes from December 10th, 2024, regular city council meeting, which was pulled from consent. City manager?
I would just have the city attorney explain the differences.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Curtis pointed out rightly that our item 4, I should first say in front of you, is a substitute minutes from the December 10th, 2024 regular meeting. And the points are underlined and bolded that are changed. The first one's on page 1. And unfortunately, we apparently don't put page numbers on our minutes. So a few pages further in, there's another bolded and underlined place. In the minutes that are eventually published, those won't be bolded and underlined, but we wanted to point out the two differences. The first one is that we fully identified all the recipients of the commendation, the council commendation, including the gentleman who wasn't present, Dustin Haugen, and then that Madison Lewis and Abby Nielsen were virtual. So that was the first edit. And then since we were making a change later on about the comprehensive plan adoption, we more clearly noted that the question had been pending from earlier, which was what occurred at the meeting. The minutes now reflect that. And then also noted that the ordinance that was approved was as amended. So just some minor changes there to clarify and make sure that those minutes are accurately reflect the proceedings.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? I will entertain a motion to approve the substitute minutes for the December 10th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Black, second by Councilmember Sweet to approve the substitute minutes. Any discussion? Question is on the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. All right, thank you. Okay, we are now moving on to council reports before 9 o'clock. Mark this down, Councilmember Sweet. Councilmember Tim Chisholm, would you like to start?
I spent time with my family and did very little council business. I received an Xbox. I wrote from Santa to Daddy on the card and then gave the Xbox to myself and then made my children compete to see who got to play my Xbox. My children talked about how Santa was mistaken in giving it to me instead of them. That was my entertainment. Thank you.
Councilmember Tim Chisholm is now taking advantage of our new council report format.
I can get up here and I can play the flute if I want for 3 minutes.
Seemed to look back, it was his idea.
I've got 3 minutes to play the banjo or tap dance or anything I like.
All right, Councilmember Black.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So obviously with the holidays, there's not that much that we haven't already talked about since the last meeting, but just a heads up, Regional Transit Committee's coming up next week. Eastside Transportation Partnership's coming up this week, and I'll make sure that my colleagues get reports from those events. And then I just want to highlight, as the chair of the legislative work group, that the legislative work group's going to meet this week. So we're returning to our in-session cadence of the legislative work group meeting weekly. And you should expect to be getting the legislative updates at every meeting from here through the end of the session at the end of April. So, and just to wrap that up, this is on the heels of us completing our one-on-one meetings with each of our legislative delegates, presenting them the results of the legislative agenda that you all approved. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sweet.
Thank you. Not a whole lot. We're starting to dig in again. However, I did have a 3-hour deep dive at Cascade Water Alliance around the Cascade Tacoma water supply contracts that we are looking forward to completing this month. I've given each one of you a flow chart of the documents that we looked at. If you're interested in looking at it, Truck and Carly are working on questions, a series of questions that I think they've already asked for clarification on, but this is going to require a pretty quick turnaround, so I probably will not be back this. So if anybody has any issues around it or wants clarification on what's in the document, please let me know. Other than that, Happy New Year.
All right. Councilmember Sweet just gave us a homework assignment. Councilmember Falcone.
I know. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to say the same thing. Thank you, Councilmember Sweet. Not all of us did as much homework as you did for council reports, nor gave others homework afterwards, but that's okay. Similar to Councilmember Tim Chisholm and others, did enjoy a lovely holiday break. So happy holidays, everybody. Happy New Year. Hope everybody had a great holiday season. Couple of things coming up. I'll be representing us at the Mendocino Farms ribbon cutting tomorrow night and welcoming them to the village at Totem Lake. I have already had we had the opportunity to enjoy some of their dinner, each of us did, and also have had the opportunity to enjoy some lunches there. And so I'm looking forward to celebrating them along with the Kirkland Chamber of Commerce tomorrow night. Next week, just a couple of quick highlights. The next SCA board meeting, where I anticipate that we will have a further discussion on the recruitment process for our new executive director, as well as board executive leadership. Looking forward to my first Board of Health meeting next week as well. Thank you, Councilmember Sweet. As well as a RI 8 meeting. So look for some relevant updates as needed, following up from those. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One thing, no report for the previous time, one thing upcoming. Tomorrow, the King County Regional Policy Committee will meet. One of the things that we're getting briefed on is a renewal of the automated fingerprint identification system at the county, AFIS. The proposal that the county is putting forward is not to collect the levy this year, and a renewal beginning in 2026 at 2.75 cents per thousand. The rate today is 2.9 cents per thousand, so a drop in rate. According to our police chief, services provided by ASIF are significant and could not easily be recreated by KPD. We've seen no feedback from staff or Sound City, so this is something that should be moving forward within RPC, but just wanted to let you know about that coming as a ballot proposal from the county later, sometime this year. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Councilmember Sweet and I attended, it's been a long day. I've been in these heels since 7 this morning. We attended the East King County Legislative Breakfast this morning at 7 a.m. There were 3 panels. Kirkland is always well represented by our 3 legislative districts. I think we had legislators on all 3 panels. Discussion this morning was on housing, budget, transportation, potential road use charge, budget, workforce, budget, and more. So it will be a long session with a primary focus on the state budget. But it was a great crowd. It always is. I have PIC tomorrow night. It's a very light agenda, primarily an orientation for new PIC members. Councilmember Tim Chisholm and I going to put you on the spot. If you're interested in attending in my place, I will follow up with you tomorrow. It's at 7 p.m.
Okay. Sure.
Okay. And then just reflecting on our last council meeting in December and proven again tonight, I looked back and I realized that I neglected to call out the very special people who make our city council meetings run so smoothly every single time. And that is our city staff, our city clerk staff, who are now proving it by even running the lights this evening. Our IT staff, who makes everything run incredibly smoothly, including the people that are in a dark room downstairs that have to pay attention to us to switch the cameras around. They do not get to just space out. They actually have to listen to the meeting. So honestly, a belated but heartfelt thank you to the IT staff and the city clerk staff for your hard work, because we literally could not do this without you. You are our unsung heroes, so thank you. And that is it from me. City Manager.
Okay, since the beginning of the year, we don't have much to report. I will say that EPSCA, the Emergency Public Sector Communications System, is now going to officially sunset. This will be belonging to has become fully PCERN, which is the Puget Sound Emergency Radio Network. Somehow I got myself elected chair of PCERN in 2025. So if you have any radio issues, I'm the person to talk to. So, but other than that transition, which we'll have more to talk with the council about in the future, don't have anything else to report. And so just want to see if anyone has calendar adjustments for the first couple of meetings. All right, seeing none. Okay, that's my report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. All right, we are now going to go to executive session to discuss 2 topics. First, we will review the performance of a public employee. Second, we will discuss litigation as authorized by RCW 4230-110-1I. We expect that the executive session will be concluded at,
Excuse me, I apologize. I'd say 9:25 for the
all
2
right.
sessions.
So
the two
about
pieces.
20 minutes for the executive session. Following the executive session, we will immediately go into a closed session to discuss collective bargaining. We expect to reconvene our regular meeting at approximately,
About 15 minutes for that one.
okay, so somebody help me do that math, 25, so 9:40, only for the purposes of adjournment. So, thank you, everybody.